In the late age of the known galaxy, when the star lanes still shimmered but dimmed a little more with each passing month, people spoke in hushed tones of the coming quiet. It wasn't nightfall that worried them, it was the long dusk before it. The time when the roads between stars, the very arteries of civilization, began to clot and collapse. The first signs were subtle. Gates flickered, just for a breath of a second more than they should. Astrotanks, once brilliant reservoirs of living light, dimmed to the sullen glow of dying coals. But subtle cracks become great fractures if ignored long enough, and civilizations are slow to believe in endings. For a generation, the galaxy denied what it already felt in its bones, but now the signs were impossible to ignore. A sky poured out its gold. A universe ran low. And the galaxy, vast and ancient, began to grow tired. Elias Verdane had seen a great many gates in his life, some grand, some crude, some humming like hymns in the void, and others built with the trembling hope of frontier settlers who prayed it would hold just long enough to connect them to the rest of humankind. But never had he seen one die. Not until today. He stood at the viewport of the Surveyor's Mercy, watching the great ring of the Kestrin transit gate fold inward upon itself, its once stable surface rippling like the skin of a drowning beast. The ship's observation glass trembled with each gravitational cough as the gate's inner lattice lost synchronization. And then it happened. A burst of distorted light, astra-burning, uncontrolled, shot across the black. A merchant cruiser halfway through the transit was ripped clean in two, one half vomiting sparks as it tumbled free, the other half still trapped in the collapsing aperture. Shattered cargo pods, bright as fireflies, scattered into the dark. Elias felt the tremor in his bones, though the ship's hull absorbed most of it. He heard the alarms, the shouts of the crew, the code-red transit broadcast echoing through local channels. But it was the silence that followed that struck him hardest, a silence thick and stunned, as though even sound itself paused in grief. Gate integrity lost, the computer announced with terrible calm. Local traffic compromised, casualty projections significant. Significant. The kind of word a machine used when the truth would break a human heart. Elias exhaled slowly. His breath fogged the viewport. This was the fourth collapse this month, and it would not be the last. Behind him, footsteps approached with a rhythm too clipped, too decisive to belong to anyone but Admiral Lyra Chen. The doors hissed open and she stepped through, her uniform immaculate despite the chaos outside. Her dark hair was tied back tightly, and her gaze, sharp, unblinking, took in the scene with a soldier's analytic sorrow. "Well?" she asked softly. Elias didn't turn. Astra decay in the Kestrin well exceeded predicted models by nearly 60%. The gate couldn't compensate. It's only a matter of time. It wasn't supposed to fail this soon. Nothing is failing when it's supposed to anymore. Lyra crossed her arms. The Council will demand answers. The Council always demands answers, Elias replied, voice rougher than he meant. But the universe is running out of them. He could feel her eyes on him, assessing, calculating, concerned in that way she'd never admit aloud. Lyra Chen was steel forged in the vacuum of crisis, but even steel needs something to brace against. In Elias, he was tired, not physically. His body was still strong, still capable of the long work days and sudden emergency deployments. But his spirit carried a weight older than he felt he had lived, as though every gate collapse aged him another year. Lyra stepped closer. "You should rest after this assessment. You look," he cut her off with a tired smile. "Don't, I know, old, drained, haunted by equations that spelled extinction." But instead he said, "We need to report to Dr. Marin Cade. She'll want the telemetry data." Lyra nodded, but her eyes lingered a moment longer, long enough to betray something deeper. She feared for him, and feared for all of them. Beyond the viewport, the remains of the merchant ship drifted like broken bones in an endless sea. Humanity was not ready to drown. The Surveyor's Mercy descended toward the Kestrin orbital station, its hull lights cutting through clouds of metallic debris. Emergency sirens echoed across comms, a chorus of despair. Rescue vessels darted in frantic formation, pulling survivors from drifting wreckage. On landing deck A12, Elias was met by Dr. Marin Cade herself, a tall, angular woman with hair the color of burnished copper and eyes that glimmered with the fever of unending thought. "Marin," Elias greeted her. "You look busy," she snapped. "Anxious? Livid that the galaxy refuses to follow the goddamn models?" "Yes, Elias, I imagine I look all of those things." Despite her tone, she stepped forward and clasped his arm in greeting. Marin was brilliant, brilliant enough to conceive of ideas that frightened even her, and she had little patience for pleasantries in a universe collapsing by the hour. Give me the readings, she demanded. Elias handed her the data slate. It's worse than we feared. It's always worse, she muttered. Astra entropy rates are accelerating. We're losing more wells every cycle. Lyra interjected. Can we stabilize existing gates? Marin snorted. With what? Prayers, bandages, Astra is the stabilizer. When Astra dies, everything built upon it dies too. Elias watched rescue ships haul twisted metal across the horizon. How many worlds will this isolate? A dozen? More? Marin turned to him, and for a moment her sharpness softened. 100, Elias, maybe 200. The number struck like a blow. 200 worlds. Entire civilizations cut adrift. Marin's voice dropped to a whisper meant only for him. Humanity can't afford to keep patching holes in a sinking ship. We need a new well, and the only one left to tap, she hesitated. Elias finished the thought for her, is ourselves. Ambassador Ridhull joined them shortly after, gliding across the deck with the elegant bipeds of his species. His skin, normally a luminous blue, had dimmed to storm gray, a sign of profound worry. Elias Verdane, he said, bowing slightly. I felt the tremor from orbit. The Kestrin gate has truly fallen. Elias nodded. There was nothing left to salvage. Ridhull closed his eyes, his frilled crest lowering in grief. My people believed the gates would outlast our own stars. The wells were ancient, older than recorded memory. They said Astra was the universe's promise to itself, endless. Nothing is endless, Marin said quietly. Not even hope. Ridhull shivered. You speak of that project again, the one your council keeps hidden behind sealed chambers. The three humans exchanged glances. The Hope engine, the mad idea. Elias opened his mouth to respond, but alarms blared across the station once more. A voice rang out. All personnel, Astra reserves at Kestrin Station reduced to critical levels. Non-essential systems shutting down. The lights dimmed. Ridhull stepped back, horrified. This station will be unusable within the decade. Try within the year, Marin corrected grimly. Ridhull stared at her. Then what of us, of the Alliance, of every connected world? Elias felt the crushing weight of his own unspoken secret. What of hope, when even that begins to collapse? Marin looked at him, her expression urging him forward. If ever there was a moment to reveal the desperation behind their last gamble, it was now. Elias inhaled and said softly, There is a plan, but it's not one you will like. Ridhull's eyes widened. You intend to build the machine. Lyra stepped between them. Ambassador, you would drain your own people's hope, Ridhull cried. You would twist their spirits into fuel? It's the only resource left, Marin said. Hope is the last untapped well, Ridhull recoiled. At what cost? Elias answered, voice barely above a whisper. That is what we intend to find out. The deck fell silent. Outside, the corpse of the Kestrin gate drifted like the skeleton of a long-dead god, and in the silence between stars, the first seeds of rebellion and salvation were sown. They gathered in a dim briefing chamber carved into the station's central spine, a place once used for trade negotiations and festive announcements. Now its walls flickered with low-power holoprojectors showing dying star lanes and red-lined supply routes. The room smelled faintly of overheated circuitry and too many tired bodies. Elias took his seat at the oval table, Lyra to his right, Marin to his left. Ambassador Ridhull sat opposite, his crest drooping like a wilted banner. Around them, lesser officials and aides watched with guarded eyes. The galaxy, Elias thought, had learned to mistrust gatherings like this. Too many bad tidings, too few remedies. Marin tapped the table and the hollows shifted. A galaxy map resolved into view, a wheel of light with thread-like roots linking stars across its arms. Gates sat along those roots like jewels in a crown, each one now tagged with a status icon. More red than Elias remembered from the last briefing. More gray, dead, beyond hope than he could bear to count. The Kestrin collapse, Marin began, her voice crisp, brings us to a critical tipping point. Astra reserves in this region are projected to hit non-functional levels within 18 months. That's optimistic. We are seeing entropy curves that suggest the decay is accelerating in ways we don't fully understand. She zoomed in on the map. Clusters of systems glowed faintly, their gate icons pulsing with low-energy warnings. Astra is not simply being used. It is fading everywhere. Wells that have produced for millennia are drying up. New extraction attempts yield diminishing returns. The fabric that allows the gates to function is unraveling. We are watching the end of an era in real time. Ridhull's voice was hollow. We have known this in our hearts for some time. My people have ancient songs about the last quiet, when the road between stars ends and each world must stand alone. Marin glanced at Elias with a flicker of irritation. Yes, well, humanity doesn't sing about sitting quietly while the universe dies. We tend to shout and break things and build others on the rubble. Lyra allowed herself a thin smile. We cope badly with surrender. Elias folded his hands on the table. They trembled just slightly. He pressed them together tighter. The question, he said, is whether the last quiet is inevitable or merely the default if no one does something insane. Ridhull stared at him, eyes like polished stones. You speak of the machine again. Marin straightened, shoulders tight. The Hope engine is not insanity. It's desperate, yes, but desperation is not madness. It is clarity at the edge of a cliff. Ridhull's crest flickered with agitation. For my people, the line is thin. You propose to drain your own species' emotional well-being to synthesize Astra. You will not convince me this is sane. One of Lyra's junior officers spoke up. Respect, Ambassador, if we do nothing. Lyra shot the young man a sharp look and he fell silent. She nodded toward Elias, signaling, your turn, say it, own it. Elias studied the galaxy map as if it were a wounded animal on an operating table. Ambassador, he said at last, you asked me once why humanity pushed so hard into the black, why we demanded gates in places other species deemed too unstable, too remote. You called us a people who ride storms and then demand more lightning. Ridhull's crest lifted fractionally. It was not meant as a compliment. I took it as one, Elias said, because it was true. We built our identity on the refusal to lie down and die gracefully. When plagues came, we invented medicines. When our skies choked with our own excess, we changed our machines. Every time the universe told us enough, we answered not yet. He looked up, eyes meeting Ridhull's across the table. Now the universe is telling all of us enough. The Astra wells are failing. Your ancient songs say this is the way of things, that stars rise and fall and so must the roads between them. You may be able to accept that. We can't, not yet, not while there is still anything left to try. Ridhull's throat pulsed, a sign of uneasy contemplation among his kind. And so you have chosen to turn inward, to mine your own spirits like ore veins. Marin cut in. Hope isn't just sentiment, Ambassador. It's a measurable psychoenergetic potential. We discovered years ago that human neurology interacts with Astra fields in unusual ways. The holomap shifted again. Lines of data scrolled beside stylized diagrams of human brains superimposed over Astra wells. Human hopeful states produce localized distortions in Astra behavior, Marin continued. Tiny effects, yes, but consistent. We see temporary reinforcement of gate stability during times of collective optimism. Shorter decay rates when populations believe in long-term outcomes, and the reverse during despair. Ridhull stared at the data as if it were blasphemy written in equations. You mean to say, he murmured, that your species stabilizes the wells when you are hopeful? Elias nodded. Marginally. Individually, it's negligible. But when billions share a direction, a belief, it's enough to nudge the probabilities. We think Astra is not entirely passive. It responds ever so slightly to the emotional shape of its surroundings. Marin's eyes took on a dangerous gleam. So if we can align and harness that response, focus the collective potential of human hope, we might be able to coax Astra into forming where it otherwise would not. In other words, we don't just watch wells dry out, we dig new ones. By draining your people's inner lives. Ridhull's voice had gone icy. By turning their hopes into fuel, like wood thrown on a fire. By using the last resource we have left, Marin shot back. Lyra spoke quietly, cutting through the edge in both their voices. We are not blind to the cost, Ambassador. We're not monsters. The engine will be controlled, regulated, will limit the draw. We're not talking about stripping every child of their dreams. Elias almost flinched at that, because he had seen the models. Limit the draw, control the drain. Pretty words wrapped around ugly math. How many, Ridhull asked softly, have volunteered? The room went still. Marin hesitated. A few thousand, she said at last. All human, some devout believers, some idealists, some with nothing left to lose. Ridhull's crest trembled. They are to become what? Batteries? Sacrifices? Anchors, Elias said. They link their emotional states to the engine's core. Their hope amplifies the field. We design protocols to prevent complete psychological collapse. We think we can avoid, he stopped himself. Because we think sounded thin, even in his own ears. Ridhull's gaze was heavy. You think? Elias looked away. On the wall, the galaxy map rotated slowly. Gate after gate flickered in warning. Later, when the briefing broke and the others scattered to their respective duties, Elias found himself alone in a narrow observation catwalk running along the station's outer ring. From there, he could see the ruin of the Kestrin gate more clearly, a broken halo drifting against the stars, its edges jagged, its once perfect symmetry shattered. It reminded him of a wedding ring D once seen cracked clean in two. The memory came unbidden. A woman in a hospital waiting room, twisting the broken ring between her fingers as she stared at a closed door. He had been a young engineer then, working on life support power grids, and he had not yet learned that it was possible to fix the machine and still lose the person. Now, staring at the dead gate, he wondered if the galaxy would prove similarly unforgiving. "You're quiet," Lyra said behind him. Elias didn't start. He'd known she was there the moment the hatch opened. Lyra moved lightly but never silently. "I'm thinking," he said. "Dangerous habit." "Habits are hard to kill," he murmured. "Even at the end of the world." She stepped up beside him, resting her forearms on the railing. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the glass. Sharp eyes, a jaw set against the weight of command, a woman who had served on more evacuation fleets than she cared to remember. "Ridhull won't stay neutral," she said. "He'll report this to the Alliance Council. They'll call it an atrocity in the making." "Is it?" Elias asked. Lyra didn't answer immediately. Her gaze followed a rescue shuttle as it ferried survivors toward the station's docking rings. "I've seen what happens when hope dies," she said at last. "On siege worlds and plague zones, people stop moving, they stop trying, they just sink. At some point, shells and beams stop being the real weapons. It's the loss of belief that kills a world." "I know," Elias said quietly. "Now Marin wants to put that on a lever," Lyra continued. "Pull here, drain a little hope, top off the tanks." "Do it enough times," she exhaled. "I don't know what that makes us." "Alive," Elias said. The word came out sharper than he intended. "It makes us alive a while longer." "At what cost?" she pressed. Elias hesitated. There it was, the question that walked the corridors with him, lay beside him in restless sleep, stared back from every reflective surface. At what cost? "The models," he said, because math was safer than feelings, suggest that controlled, low-level draw on volunteers could maintain a handful of key gates for decades. Used sparingly, the engine gives us time. Time to search for alternative solutions. Time to push the problem forward," Lyra finished. "Hand it to our children instead." "Isn't that what every generation does?" Elias asked. "We inherit a mess, we do what we can, we pass along something a little less broken. Or we fail and we pass along nothing at all." She studied his face, really studied it, searching for the man she'd met years ago, a younger Elias with bright eyes and a stubborn grin who had spoken of astrophysics as though he were describing poetry written in light. "You don't sound like you believe that anymore," she said softly. He turned back to the viewport. The dead gate stared back like a blind eye. "I believe in equations," he said. "I believe in data. Right now, the numbers say, without the engine, the gates die, the Alliance fractures, and 1,000 worlds starve in the dark. That's not philosophy, it's arithmetic." "And with the engine?" she asked. He swallowed. "With the engine, we live longer, long enough maybe to find a true solution." Lyra's jaw tightened. "What if there isn't one?" "Then someone," Elias said, "will at least get the chance to prove us wrong." They stood in silence for a time. Out in the black, the rescue operations wound down. The dead ship hulls drifted farther apart. Small figures moved like insects along the station's spine, welding, patching, repairing. Humanity's nature, he thought, to mend, even as the structure that supported everything fractured beneath them. "You know what frightens the aliens the most?" Lyra said abruptly. He glanced at her. "Our capacity for violence?" She shook her head. "Our refusal to stop. Most species in the Alliance have accepted, in some deep part of their culture, that everything ends. They build philosophies around it, they make peace with it. That's why they're so calm about this, resigned, even, they grieve but they bow." "And we don't," Elias murmured. "No," Lyra said. "We build a machine to wring light out of our own hearts and call it a plan." There was no accusation in her tone, only a weary respect, and that perhaps was worse. "Marin will move ahead regardless of what the Council says," Lyra continued. "You know that." "She'll need me," Elias said. Lyra smiled faintly. "She always does. The theory is hers, but the engine is yours, your designs, your equations." He closed his eyes for a moment. He could see the schematics behind his lids, rings of crystal, lattices of superconducting coils, neural interface arrays like delicate cobwebs. A device large as a city, hungry as a god. He had dreamed it once. Woken with tears on his face and the memory of a sound, millions of voices whispering, pouring something precious into a vast, unseen vessel. "Lyra," he said slowly, "do you ever think we were not meant to touch certain things?" "All the time," she replied. "Every time I sign off on a weapon that can split a ship in half. Every time I order people into a fight they can't win, but if we don't touch them, someone else will, or the universe will touch us first. She straightened, stepping back from the rail. The machine is happening. The only question is whether it will be built with care. Or in desperation, by people with fewer scruples than you and Marin. He regarded her with a tired, searching look. Is that supposed to comfort me? It's supposed to keep you from running, Lyra said. Because if you don't see this through, someone else will and they won't blink where you would. He almost laughed. You think I'd run? I think, she said quietly, you're more afraid than you know. He had no answer for that. Stations like Kestrin had once been vibrant crossroads of a restless galaxy. Markets, shrines, diplomatic halls, music spilling out of taverns where spacers traded stories and lies, all threaded together with the constant hum of arriving and departing ships. Now the station felt like a town after its mine closed, still standing, still technically alive, but hollowed out. Elias walked its corridors that evening, not as a dignitary or engineer, but as a man trying to take the measure of a wound. Power saver lights cast a wan, orange glow. Shops were shuttered. Cafes served thin rations and brewed weak drinks from dwindling stores. A vendor waved a hand over a cart of plastic trinkets, their embedded lights flickering feebly. Last of the gate charms, she called to passers-by, for luck on the lanes while they still exist. People passed by without meeting her eyes. In a central concourse, a small crowd gathered around a preacher standing on a crate. He was human, Railthin, his clothes worn but clean, his voice carrying with the natural resonance of someone accustomed to speaking over noise. The wells have always been a gift, he cried. You think it an accident? You think Astra was just sitting there waiting to be burned like lamp oil? No, it was a covenant, and we have broken it. We have treated holy fire like cheap fuel, and now the universe withdraws its favor. Some in the crowd nodded, eyes shining with fearful fervor. Others shook their heads and walked away, unwilling to trade one despair for another. Elias paused at the edge of the throng. The preacher's words were nonsense from a scientific standpoint, yet there was a shape to them, an attempt to explain loss in terms of punishment and debt. People needed that. Equations did not comfort at bedtime. The last quiet is coming, the preacher warned. But we must greet it with humility, not with grasping hands. We must not build idols to steal back what the heavens have reclaimed. A murmur went through the crowd at that. Rumors traveled quickly on a station with little else to do. They were already talking about the machine. Elias turned away before someone recognized him. In another corridor, someone had painted a symbol on the wall in luminescent pigment, a circle surrounded by radiating lines like a stylized sun. Beneath it, in shaky human script, "Keep the light burning." A child stood staring up at it, hand wrapped around her father's fingers. Her eyes were wide. Will the gates really all go out? She asked. Her father hesitated. Elias watched his shoulders tighten. Not if we can help it, the man said at last. How? The girl persisted. He looked down at her. I don't know, but humans always find something. Elias moved on before they saw him. His throat felt tight. Humans always find something. Sometimes he thought that something was just another way to pay later. Marin's lab on the station was a cramped temporary setup, patched into the broader infrastructure with improvised cables and jury-rigged conduits. It suited her temperament. She had always preferred the edge of collapse to the comfort of perfectly ordered facilities. To Marin, an experiment without risk was just a demonstration. When Elias entered, she was hunched over a console, fingers flying, muttering to herself. Entropy rates? No, that can't be right. Unless the field gradient is steeper near decay fronts, which would explain the Kestrin spike. But then why didn't we see it at Seraphim Gate? Unless their readings were faulty. Of course they were faulty, their sensors are older than my grandmother. Marin, Elias said. She froze mid-sentence, then straightened slowly. You're back. Did I leave? In the way that matters, she said, studying his face. You went wandering, I know that look. You went and soaked up more sorrow from the common folk so you could pour it on my floor. He almost smiled. Someone has to keep you grounded. I'm well grounded in reality, thanks, she said. I just prefer to look at it through data instead of sentiment. She gestured at the swirling graphs on her screen. These are ugly, Elias, beautiful in their precision, but ugly in their implications. What do they say? That Astra entropy is not linear, she said. It's accelerating. The more we lose, the faster what's left unravels. It's as if the fabric is fraying and each broken thread weakens the next. So the more gates die, the more likely others are to fail, he said. Yes, cascading collapse. She rubbed her temples. We thought we had decades. We may have only years, maybe less if these trends continue. He stepped closer, looking over her shoulder. What about the correlation with human hopeful states? Does it hold? Marin's expression changed, softening with a strange, fierce pride. Oh, that holds. If there's one thing the universe loves, it's consistency in weird behavior. The Kestrin data shows it again. During the evacuation, she pulled up a sequence. Lines on the graph spiked and dipped in eerie synchrony. Look at this. Panic during the first tremors. Entropy spikes. Then, as the rescue operations stabilize, as people start believing they might live, she pointed at a brief, localized flattening of the upward curve. See, the decay slows, only by a fraction, but it's there. Hope buys time, Elias murmured. Hope shapes the physics, Marin said. At least a little, enough to matter. And the engine? He asked. She brought up another set of schematics, rings within rings, annotated with overlays of neural interface arrays. With a controlled network of human anchors feeding their hopeful states into a synchronized field, we can amplify that effect by orders of magnitude, she said. Instead of a faint nudge spread across billions of uncoordinated minds, we get a focused shove. Not just stabilizing existing astra, it might induce local formation in depleted regions. In other words, Elias said, new wells. Marin nodded. Wells dug not into rock, but into possibility. He stared at the design. And the cost? She was quiet for a moment. In small-scale tests, she said carefully, subjects reported fatigue, mild anhedonia, reduced ability to visualize positive outcomes. It's like emotionally overextending oneself. Most recovered after rest. And large-scale, he pressed. She met his eyes. We don't know, not yet. You have simulations. Simulations are not reality, she said sharply. Marin, he insisted. She sighed, then flicked up a new display. At full intended output, enough to stabilize priority gate networks across the core worlds, the draw on anchors would be significant. Prolonged exposure could lead to chronic emotional blunting, loss of initiative, reduced capacity for joy. Empty shells, Elias said quietly. Functional shells, Marin corrected. They'd still walk, talk, do tasks, but the color would be washed out, like living in grayscale. Best case scenario is that we rotate anchors frequently, spread the load. Worst case scenario? We burn them out, he said. She didn't deny it. Did the volunteers know this? He asked. We told them there would be risks, Marin said. Many of them have seen the gates fail. They've watched supply convoys stop coming. Some lost whole families on routes that no longer exist. They know what's at stake. Knowing what's at stake isn't the same as understanding what you're giving away, Elias said. Hope isn't just a resource, Marin. It's the thing that makes people get up in the morning. It's the reason they endure. And if we don't use it, she snapped, there won't be mornings for a lot of them. There will be empty worlds and dark skies and the slow death of 1,000 cultures cut off from each other forever. You talk like hope is sacred. Maybe it is. But what is sacred for, Elias, if not to be spent when all else fails? He looked at her. Spent, or sacrificed? She smiled grimly. You grew up on a farm colony, didn't you? I remember you telling me that once. Your father used to talk about seed corn. He blinked. The memory surfaced, the old man's calloused hands holding a handful of pale kernels. You don't eat this, his father had said. No matter how hungry you get, this is for planting. This is so there's a next season at all. Yes, Elias said slowly. Is hope seed corn, Marin asked, or is it the harvest? If it's seed, then maybe we should hold on to it, ration it, never touch it. But if it's harvest, if it's what you reap from a season of struggle, then maybe this is what it's for, to carry the species over the next barren winter. Her eyes burned with fever-bright conviction. I don't want to build a machine that drains people, she said. I want to build a machine that says to the universe, we will not lie down. That's a statement worth some sacrifices, unless you think the alternative is better. Elias thought of the little girl staring at the glowing symbol on the wall. Of the father who had told her humans always found something. He thought of Ridhul's sorrow, of the preacher warning against idols, of Lyra's blunt assessment that if he didn't see this through, someone less cautious would. I don't know if the alternative is better, he said. I just know it's simpler. Let the gates die, let history fade into pockets of isolated memory. Each world becomes its own small story again. You don't believe that, Marin said. He didn't. Not truly. Because somewhere deep inside, beneath the weary calculations and the stacked grief, there was still a stubborn ember that refused to go out. An unreasonable conviction that humanity's story was not meant to end in quiet separation. We have no right to decide for everyone, he said. No, Marin agreed. But someone has to decide whether the machine is built at all, and that, Elias, is on us. You, me, Lyra, the council, the universe doesn't vote. It just waits to see what we do. He stared at the core schematic of the engine. In its lines, he saw something terrible and magnificent, like the first fire stolen in myth, both gift and curse. What if we miscalculated? He asked softly. What if hope isn't as resilient as we think? Then we fall, Marin said, but at least we fall reaching. She stepped back from the console, the decision already made in her heart, if not yet in the wider world. We're leaving for the primary construction site within 3 days, she said. Lyra's secured an escort. Ridhul will protest, but he won't stop us, not yet. Elias's pulse quickened. 3 days? We don't have the luxury of slower timelines, Marin said. Not with entropy curves like these. The galaxy is at twilight, Elias. We either build a torch or we walk into night. He felt the stir of that ember again, painful in its persistence. A torch that burns on hope, he murmured. And we don't know how much fuel there really is. Marin's expression softened just a little. That's what frightens you most, isn't it? She said. That hope might be finite, that one day there's nothing left to draw from, that we might find the bottom of the well. Yes, he admitted. She touched his shoulder gently. Maybe we will, maybe there is a bottom, or maybe hope is like a muscle. It grows stronger the more it's used. The only way to know is to try. Humanity has never discovered its limits without running headlong into them. He gave a ragged laugh. An inspiring epitaph. Let's make sure it's not one, she replied. Outside the lab window, the dead gate turned slowly in the void, backlit by a field of distant stars that cared nothing for the rise and fall of civilizations. Between those uncaring lights and the wounded machinery of a dying age, one man stood in a cramped room, staring at a design for a machine that would ask everything of his own species. In his chest, despair and duty wrestled. And somewhere beneath both, quietly, stubbornly, hope refused to die. Absolutely, I will now deliver the remaining -3000 words of Chapter 1, Parts 3, 4, and 5 in one single message, completing the full -5000 word chapter. It will continue seamlessly from where the story left off, keeping the Steinbeck, Tolkien tone, the HFY spirit, and all the beats you requested. The station's long night cycle descended slowly, as though reluctant to surrender what little light remained. The artificial dusk spread in concentric layers, dimming corridors one by one until only the emergency strips along the floors glowed like lines painted by a tired hand. Yet even in the soft dark, Elias found no rest. He prepared to leave the station the next morning for the outer colonies, where astrodecay had reached emergency thresholds. His mission, his burden, was to witness the dying light firsthand. He wished someone else could go. He wished someone else could make sense of it. But he was Elias Verdane, and the galaxy had stopped granting wishes decades ago. The shuttle descended toward Halion 3, one of the oldest human settlements in the Kestrin region. It had once been a place of industry and promise, mining rigs rising like giant mechanical trees, cities humming with commerce, children flying kites under a sky framed by 2 pale moons. Now its surface flickered with rolling blackouts like a creature shivering with fever. The Astra reservoir beneath Halion's crust had once powered a cluster of 3 gates. Now it sputtered like an engine running on fumes. Elias had seen the projections. Within the year, Halion would be cut off entirely. He felt it even before the shuttle landed, the oppressive weight of stalling hope. A heaviness in the air, subtle but unmistakable. Marin's studies had noted this phenomenon. Places where astrodecay advanced far enough began to experience psychosocial downturns. Not magically or spiritually, but psychologically, civilizations that felt their connection to the galaxy slipping away lost their spark. Hope thinned. Dreams felt smaller. People stopped planning for futures that might not arrive. As he disembarked, a cold wind swept across the landing platform. The lights of Halion City flickered below, as if even the electrons were tired. A local official approached, a woman with deep lines around her eyes and a badge that hung heavily from her uniform. "Elias Verdane?" she asked. He nodded. "I'm Acting Director Janny Reeve. We've been told to expect you." She glanced warily at the sky. "We could use better news than the kind we've been getting." "I'll give you honest news," Elias said. Reeve snorted. "Honesty hasn't done us many favors lately." She led him into a transport car, half the lights on its interior dead, while she explained Halion's situation. Power rationing had reached the point where only hospitals, communication centers, and the Astra Monitoring Institute received uninterrupted supply. The mines had closed. Factories stood idle. Schools had shortened their days to conserve energy. "People try to stay optimistic," Reeve said, "but optimism is a hungry thing. Takes more energy than we have to feed it." Elias watched a group of citizens gathered around a street lamp as they passed outside. They stood close to its dim glow as if it were a campfire against a long, cold night. Has there been unrest? He asked. Not yet, Reeve replied. But people feel the walls closing in. We used to talk about opportunities, trade, expansion. Now all anyone talks about is survival and what happens when the gates finally go dark. She glanced at him sidelong. Some say the end is natural, a cycle, that we should retreat gracefully. And you? Elias asked. Reeve's lips tightened. I didn't raise my children to live in a universe where every star is suddenly too far away to reach. I won't go gentle into that kind of ending. The car slowed at the Astra Institute. It was a squat building perched on a cliff overlooking the sea, its structure reinforced to withstand storms and, more recently, the tremors of subterranean Astra instability. Inside, the laboratories flickered with failing power cells. Screens stuttered. Instruments beeped with uneven rhythms like heart monitors for a patient slipping toward oblivion. This way, Reeve said, leading him to a central chamber. Elias approached the primary well monitor, a column of crystalline lattice once bright enough to illuminate the entire lab. Now it glowed a faint, sickly blue. He placed a hand on its surface. It vibrated very gently, astraflux trembling with weakness. Have your readings been stable? He asked. Reeve shook her head. Stability ended months ago. We're seeing chaotic fluctuations, entropy spikes, random collapses, temporary surges with no apparent cause. Elias leaned closer. Temporary surges, she nodded. Small ones, we thought they were errors at first, but they correlate with, well, she hesitated, with crowd events, times when the population is, if you'll forgive the sentiment, collectively hopeful, festival nights, communal relief shipments. Celebrations of the old Unity packs. Elias felt something shift in his chest. You've noticed the correlation too, Reeve frowned. Too. He didn't respond directly. Instead, he gently rested his forehead against the crystalline pillar. It was cool to the touch, humming faintly against his skin. When did this begin? He asked. Within the last year, Reeve said. Before that, the well behaved like every other aging reservoir, but now hope affects it, or seems to. Elias felt the weight of Marin's theories pressing on his mind. He thought again of the people huddled around the street lamp, of the father and child staring at the message on the station wall. Keep the light burning. Hope is a force. Hope is fuel. It frightened him. And yet, it was the only thread still shining in the darkness. Director Reeve, Elias said softly, what I'm about to ask is sensitive, but I need to know, would your people accept a radical solution if one existed? She gave a humorless laugh. They'd accept miracles at this point. Short of that, they'd accept anything that isn't surrender. There may be something, Elias said, but it would require courage, sacrifice, and trust. Reeve studied him closely. Is this about that engine rumor, the one circulating through council whispers? He met her gaze but said nothing. Reeve sighed. If humanity has one defining trait, Dr. Verdane, it's that we don't know when to quit. If you told these people the universe could be held together by their own stubborn refusal to give up, they'd believe you. He wished, briefly, painfully, that he believed it as wholeheartedly as she seemed to think he did. That night, Elias walked alone along Hallian's coastline, where the waves carried a faint luminescence. Long ago, the planet's indigenous bacteria had developed a reaction to Astra runoff that made the surf shimmer gently, like moonlight given physical form. Now the glow flickered, fading in uneven patches, another sign of dwindling energy beneath the crust. He sat on a low outcropping of rock and watched the horizon. Astra had once brought humanity the stars. Now it abandoned them as quietly as a tide receding from a barren shore. The wind cut across his coat, the chill bit deeper than it should have. Why here? He whispered to himself. Why us? Why now? He didn't expect an answer, but something inside him whispered back anyway. Because you pushed the farthest, because you asked the most of the universe, because you hoped too brightly. He pressed a hand over his eyes. Then how do we fix what brightness broke? Footsteps approached from behind. It was Ambassador Ridhull. His species moved with unsettling grace, their limbs stretching and folding with fluid precision. In the low light, Ridhull looked like a sculpture carved from starlight and sorrow. May I join you? The ambassador asked. Elias nodded. Ridhull sat beside him, folding his legs beneath him in a posture of contemplation. I spoke with your director, Reeve, Ridhull said quietly. She thinks highly of you. I'm not sure why, Elias murmured. Humans often undervalue themselves, Ridhull replied. It is one of your more endearing flaws. They watched the dimming surf together. Elias, Ridhull said after a time, I fear what your people intend to build. Not because I doubt your good intentions, but because I understand the nature of hope. Elias turned to him. Explain. Ridhull's crest fluttered sadly. Among my people, hope is not a virtue but a weight. Too much of it pulls us apart. We do not hope boldly as humans do. We endure, persist. Hope is a flame that burns us if we hold it too long. He lifted a slender hand toward the glowing sea. Your species is different. Humans thrive on hope. You treat it like a weapon, a tool, a lantern for darkest nights. And now you wish to turn that lantern into a furnace. Elias swallowed. We don't know if it will come to that. You do know, Ridhul replied gently. That is what frightens you most. Humans see the cost written in the shadows, and yet you run toward it. Would you rather we sat and waited for the gates to all collapse? Elias asked. No, Ridhul admitted, but I would rather you did not sacrifice the core of what makes you human. And if that's the only way to save everyone, Ridhul lowered his gaze, then perhaps the galaxy is not meant to be saved. Those words cut deeper than anything Elias expected. He looked at the dying glimmer of the sea. I refuse to believe that. I know, Ridhul said softly. That is why you, Elias Verdane, are dangerous. Elias didn't argue, because part of him feared it was true. The next morning, the skies over Halion burned with the orange glow of ion thrusters as shuttles departed for every corner of the region, evacuation ships, supply carriers, diplomatic envoys with desperate messages. The world was unraveling, but it had not yet surrendered. As Elias prepared to depart, Director Reeve met him one last time. If you find a solution, she said, gripping his hand tightly, bring it to us. Whatever the cost, we cannot face the last quiet. He nodded. I can't promise success. Promise effort, she said. The rest is for history. Elias boarded the shuttle. As it lifted, he saw Halion City shrink beneath him, its flickering lights no brighter than embers struggling against a rising wind. Humanity had built its future on those embers, and now they dimmed. But embers, Elias reminded himself, could be fanned back into flame, if someone dared to try. The Surveyor's Mercy rejoined the fleet by nightfall. Lyra Chen stood waiting for him when he stepped off the boarding ramp. How bad? She asked. Worse, Elias said simply. She exhaled through her nose. Then we're out of time. We were out of time before we left Kestrin, Elias replied. Now we're just measuring the margins. Lyra nodded toward the ship's forward deck. Marin wants to speak with us. She says she's made progress. Progress. The word felt obscene in a universe dying by inches, but he followed Lyra anyway. In the briefing chamber, Dr. Marin Cade stood before a holodisplay of the Hope engine design. The projection dominated the room, vast interlocking rings of crystal, metal, and neural conduits spinning in slow, graceful rotation like a mechanical star. Ridhul stood in the corner, arms folded, crest low. Marin looked up as Elias entered. Her eyes burned with a dangerous mix of triumph and dread. I've finished recalculating the anchor energy matrix, she said. We can distribute the emotional load far more evenly than before. The system will still be risky, but survivable. Lyra crossed her arms. Define survivable. Marin hesitated. It won't kill anyone. But it will drain them, Ridhul interjected. Slowly, painfully, like leaching color from a painting until only outlines remain. Marin shot him a hard glare. Hope regenerates. Not infinitely, Ridhul whispered. Elias stepped closer to the projection. Saw its terrible beauty reflected in his eyes. This machine, he said softly, will shape the future of the galaxy. Yes, Marin said, it will save millions. That's the goal. It will cost us something we don't fully understand. Silence rippled through the room. Marin finally spoke. We can't survive without it, Elias, you know that. The gates are collapsing faster than anyone predicted. Aliens can search for new wells until the galaxy goes dark. They won't find any. Astra is dying everywhere. The only known force that interacts with it positively is human hope. Lyra placed a hand on Elias' shoulder. And you're the only one who can finalize the engine's resonance architecture. Without you, it's just sketches and theory. Ridhul stepped forward, lowering his voice. If you proceed, the Alliance will turn against humanity. They will see this machine as an existential threat. They already fear the idea of it. We don't have a choice, Marin said sharply. There is always a choice, Ridhul replied. What you mean is that you don't have a palatable choice. Elias said nothing, because in his heart he knew the truth. Humanity would choose survival over purity, hope over surrender, fire over darkness, even if that fire burned them. Marin stepped closer, her voice gentler now. Elias, we need you. Humanity needs you. Every dying world. Every child staring at flickering lights. Every traveler lost because a gate failed mid-transit. Lyra added, if there's any chance to save them, don't turn away. Elias looked at the engine again. A machine that would spin hope into light. A device capable of stealing from the soul to hold back the dark. A miracle. A monstrosity. A last, desperate torch lifted in a dying age. He closed his eyes. His father's voice echoed in memory, "You don't eat the seed corn. But sometimes you plant it in winter when the ground is hard because it's the only chance of having a spring at all." He opened his eyes. "I'll do it," he said. Marin let out a breath, half victory, half relief. Lyra nodded once, solemnly. Ridhul lowered his head in sorrow, and outside the ship, beyond its armored hull, the galaxy spun on tired limbs, carrying a population that could not yet see that their final hope had just been set into motion. Elias Verdane, reluctant architect of a miracle and a tragedy, had taken the first step toward building the machine that would reshape the fate of civilization. But as he stared into the shimmering projection of the Hope engine, a cold truth gnawed at him. Hope may be a well, but every well can run dry. And somewhere in the cosmic dark, the faint outline of the last quiet waited. The construction site chosen for the Hope engine lay on the barren world of Vaskra 9, a planet so geologically inert and atmospherically thin it was said the world itself barely remembered being alive. Its surface was a flat, broken plain of dark basalt, littered with ancient volcanic scars like the hardened footprints of extinct giants. The silence there felt heavier than the vacuum, something deep, waiting, almost sacred. Humanity had chosen it for 3 reasons. First, distance. No major trade routes passed near Vaskra 9. Its isolation shielded the project from public panic and political scrutiny, at least for now. Second, geological stillness. The machine they planned to build required stability finer than a hair's breadth. Vaskra 9 offered a silence undisturbed by quakes or atmospheric storms. Third, though none of humanity's allies accepted this explanation, was symbolism. If they must build a device that touched the soul, then perhaps it should rise from a world empty of all other influences. A blank page on which to write a miracle, or a disaster. Elias Verdane watched from a descending shuttle as the Hope engine facility came into view for the first time. Even partially completed, it resembled some vast artifact buried beneath the planet's skin, an ancient starship skeleton or the ribcage of a forgotten titan. Circular in design, it spanned nearly 7 kilometers end to end, with outer rings sunk into the rock and inner chambers rising like crystalline towers. Each tower was threaded with cables thick as tree trunks, glowing faintly with precursor energy. Suspended scaffolds hung across the open interior where hundreds of workers moved like ants across the metal web. Lyra Chen stood beside Elias at the viewport, arms folded. "It looks alive," she murmured. Marin Cade stepped forward, unable to hide a fierce smile. "It is alive, at least it will be." "It looks like a cathedral," Elias said. "Good," Marin replied. "Temples are where miracles happen." Lyra shot her a look. "And where heresy begins." Marin's smile sharpened. "Depends on who's writing the scripture." The shuttle touched down near the central operations dome. As the ramp lowered, a gust of cold, thin air swirled into the cabin, sharp enough to sting the lungs, dry enough to taste like dust turned to powder. A group of technicians and security officers awaited them, their uniforms dark against the pale surface. "Dr. Verdane," one of the technicians greeted, "welcome to the engine." Elias nodded, but as he descended the ramp, the full scale of the structure struck him anew, not in its dimensions, but in its intent. This wasn't a lab device. Not a tool or even a reactor. It was a monument. A statement etched into metal and crystal: humanity refuses to die. And that truth frightened him more than the machine itself. Inside the operations dome, the air was warmer, thick with power output from the preliminary generators. Walls curved upward to a point high above, patterned with lattice-like reinforcements that shimmered faintly as though resonating with some distant frequency. Marin led Elias to a central console table. At her gesture, the room dimmed and a holographic projection of the Hope engine filled the space, towering, intricate, almost impossible. It looked like a flower carved from starlight. No, like the skeleton of a star, reassembled in the shape of human defiance. Elias stepped closer. The hologram pulsed as it rotated, revealing the internal architecture. Concentric rings of crystalline resonance chambers, linked by neural conduits and Astra field amplifiers. "Explain it to me again," Lyra said, though she had heard it a dozen times already. Marin obliged, her voice calm but threaded with electric passion. "The outer lattice channels ambient emotional flux. Human minds produce a measurable psychic imprint, subtle, yes, but statistically consistent across entire populations. The resonance chambers amplify that imprint, focusing it into a coherent field." The neural conduits then convert this mental momentum into a form of protoastra, a raw state we can catalyze into usable energy. Lyra raised an eyebrow. In simpler terms, it turns hope into power, Marin said. Collective human hope, Elias added, feeling a shiver of unease. Hope is a directed emotional potential. When billions share belief in a future, the psychic field of civilization tilts slightly. The engine harnesses that tilt. Lyra frowned. And if billions don't believe? The silence deepened, Marin's jaw tightened. Then the engine loses output. Which means, Lyra pressed. Elias answered quietly, it means hope is finite, and if we drain too much too fast, we may not be able to replenish it. Marin turned sharply toward him. We don't know that. We know enough to be afraid of it, Elias replied. Lyra crossed her arms again. What about non-human species? Could the engine draw from them as well? No, Marin said immediately. Human neural structures respond to astra in ways we haven't observed in other species. Hope interacts differently with human cognition. That's why the engine is uniquely ours. Lyra nodded. And that's exactly why the aliens are terrified. As if summoned by her words, the arrival chime rang. The door opened. Ambassador Ridhull entered silently, his crest low, his posture wary. He gazed at the projection of the Hope engine as though staring at an open grave. I see the rumors are true, Ridhull said quietly. You've built a god. Marin bristled. It's not a god. Ridhull's eyes glowed faintly. To reshape fundamental reality, what else is it? It's a machine, Elias said, though the words felt thin. A tool, Ridhull shook his head. Tools mend or build, this drains, consumes. How can you not feel the darkness of it? Marin stepped forward. Because darkness is what we're trying to avoid. Ridhull turned to Elias. Does she speak for you? Elias hesitated. In that hesitation, Ridhull found his answer. Construction continued for weeks, and the Hope engine grew like an iron forest. Towers rose along the inner ring. Neural conduits, fine as glass threads and strong as diamond, were strung between towers in patterns resembling spiderwebs of light. Massive crystalline cores were lowered into place with cranes that groaned under their weight. It was a marvel of engineering. It was a sin whispered in metal. Rumors spread across human worlds. Speculation flourished. Fear blossomed among allied species. Riots erupted in cities where people feared their children's hopes would be harvested. And yet, amidst the fear, thousands volunteered. They arrived on Vaskra 9 by the shuttle load. Young dreamers, old saints, widowed mothers with nothing left but a desperate wish for their children's future. Soldiers who had seen worlds crumble. Artists who believed beauty was worth preserving. Farmers who had watched drought wither crops and refused to yield. Scientists who believed in improbable miracles. They came from across the human sphere, drawn by something primal, the need to act, to do something, anything, rather than sit and watch the galaxy die. They were the anchor candidates. Without them, the engine would remain a hollow shell. Elias met many of them personally. He felt it was his duty, as architect of the machine, to look into their eyes before he asked anything of them. Each volunteer placed a hand atop a resonance crystal, allowing the system to read their emotional profile. One young man, barely 20, looked at Elias nervously. Does it hurt? The connection is gentle, Elias said. You may feel light or tired or introspective, but you'll be safe. The young man nodded. I lost my sister when the gate to our colony failed. If this helps keep other families together, I want to be part of that. Another was an elderly woman with eyes clouded by cataracts but voice steady as stone. My husband believed we would reach the stars together, she said. If my hope can keep his dream alive for others, then let me give it. Let it flow. A child of 12 approached with her parents, though she was turned away. We can't accept minors, Elias said gently, but I want to help, the girl insisted. You said hope matters, and I have a lot of hope, more than old people. The parents apologized, but the girl's words lingered with Elias long after she left. So much hope contained in such a small frame. Would this machine break children like her, even if she never stepped foot inside it? The day of the first small-scale test arrived. The engine was not yet complete, but the inner lattice and primary resonance chamber were operational. Dozens of technicians adjusted readouts, calibrated crystal nodes, synchronized neural conduits. The air vibrated with anticipation. With fear, Elias stood at the central console, Marin at his side. Lyra watched from an elevated balcony with a security team. Ambassador Ridhull observed from behind a force field, his presence both symbolic and cautionary. Elias activated the intercom. All personnel, this is a preliminary test of the Hope engine. Minimal input, minimal output. We expect no significant psychosocial effects. Anchor Candidate Group 1, prepare for integration. A group of 8 volunteers stepped into the ring. They formed a circle around the primary chamber, each placing their palms against surface nodes that pulsed in response to their touch. Gentle filaments of light connected them to the machine. Commencing Phase 1, Marin announced. The chamber lights dimmed. The resonance lattices began to hum, a harmonic vibration so low and deep it seemed to resonate in the bones rather than the ears. The air thickened. Elias felt something inside the machine stir. It was not mechanical. It was not alive. It was something indescribable, like the first inhalation before a choir sings. The crystals brightened. The volunteers inhaled sharply in unison. The hum rose. The neural conduits glowed. And then a spark. A flash. Not light, but something that felt like light. The chamber filled with shimmering particulate energy that looked almost like dust motes catching sunlight. It gathered, condensed, coalesced, until hovering in the center of the ring, a small sphere of Astra formed. Alive, brilliant, impossible, Marin's voice shook. Output confirmed, we've done it. The volunteers gasped again, this time in weariness. A few staggered. One sat down abruptly, rubbing her eyes. Lyra called through the intercom. Are they all right? Marin checked the vitals. Fatigue, minor emotional drain, temporary. Elias stared at the astrosphere. It pulsed like a heartbeat. A single beat of hope, drawn from 8 souls, he felt awe, horror. Conflicting emotions he couldn't articulate. Ridhol's voice broke the silence. Shut it down, he whispered. Marin hesitated. Ambassador, shut it down. Elias reached for the console. The hum faded. The lights dimmed. The neural conduits went dark. The astrosphere flickered, then dissolved into a cascade of fading particles. The volunteers exhaled in relief, as though waking from something too heavy to name. Marin's fingers trembled slightly as she removed her headpiece. It works, she said softly. It really works. Ridhol stared at her with devastated eyes. Of course it works, that is why it must be destroyed. Marin bristled. Ambassador, you are draining them, Ridhol said, pointing at the volunteers. I felt it from across the room. A sudden emptiness, a hollowness. How can you not understand what you're doing? Elias swallowed hard. He felt it too, just for a moment. A tiny grief tugged at his heart, not despair, but absence. Marin lifted her chin. We regained Astra. The gates can be saved. The Alliance can endure. At the cost of your souls, Ridhol cried. Silence answered him, because no one, not Marin, not Lyra, not the technicians, could refute what they had felt. Elias finally spoke. We need to stop for today, no more tests. Marin rounded on him. Elias, no, he said firmly. Not until we analyze everything. The drain is measurable. We need to understand its limits. The limits, Ridhol whispered, are the limits of your own hearts. In the days that followed, disagreements exploded across human networks. News of the test leaked, whether from a frightened technician or an intercepted signal remained unclear. Public reaction was immediate and violent. Some hailed the engine as a miracle. Some denounced it as a violation of the human spirit. Some feared extinction more than moral cost. Some feared the machine more than extinction itself. Religious leaders called emergency synods. Philosophers debated long into sleepless nights. Alien governments issued formal protests. 3 allied species severed communications entirely. Within the facility, tension thickened into something palpable, fear mixed with grim determination. Elias retreated to his private lab to run numbers long into the night. He fed emotional flux equations into the model. He examined neural resilience curves. He simulated draw rates and hopeful state regeneration thresholds. Hours bled into one another. Finally, exhausted, he leaned back in his chair as the datapad displayed a grim result. Hope, finite, dangerously so, not infinitely replenishing, not inexhaustible, not safe. The human race possessed only so much hope to give before the well ran dry, and the engine would ask for more than anyone realized. Marin entered quietly. You haven't slept, she muttered. Neither have you, Elias replied. She ignored that. Did you find anything? He handed her the datapad. She read in silence. Her expression did not break, but something in her posture tightened like a violin string stretched to the snapping point. Finally, she whispered, it doesn't change the reality. It changes everything, Elias said. If we drain too much hope, we won't, Marin said sharply. Not if we calibrate properly. You don't know that. We choose extinction or the unknown, she said, voice trembling. Those are the only options left. He looked at her with weary eyes. And how many anchors must we sacrifice for a chance? They're volunteers, she said, almost pleading. That doesn't absolve us. Elias, she whispered, if the gates collapse, billions die, entire civilizations go dark, humanity falls back into 1,000 isolated pockets. This machine is the only thing standing between us and the long night. He felt something break inside him, a truth he couldn't admit aloud, because she was right. But so was Ridhull. We'll proceed, he said at last, but cautiously, one step at a time, and not without constant ethical review. Marin nodded slowly. That's all I ask. But Elias saw the truth in her eyes. She would push this engine forward even if every ethicist in the galaxy screamed. The chapter closes on a single scene, quiet and devastating. Elias returned to the anchor candidate quarters late one night. Most were asleep. A few sat in dim common rooms, speaking in hushed tones or staring at the walls as though listening for echoes. He passed by a window overlooking the engine. Its towers glowed faintly in the starlight, luminous veins pulsing with nascent energy. A temple, a reactor, a soul furnace, a war waiting to ignite. Elias leaned his forehead against the glass. Please don't burn us, he whispered. He did not know whether he was speaking to the engine or to humanity itself. The convocation was held in the Great Hall of Concord, a vast chamber carved into the moon-sized station of Ethris Prime. Once, the hall stood as the shining symbol of unity, a place where 100 species pledged cooperation under the endless glow of the Astra lattice that illuminated its vaulted ceiling. Now the lattice flickered. Its light wavered like a dying candle. The chamber felt colder than Elias remembered, as if even the air mourned. Representatives from across the galaxy gathered beneath the trembling glow. Some wore ceremonial robes woven from ancestral silks. Others, scaled or feathered or luminous, carried the signs and sense of worlds Elias knew only from charts. The hall rippled with languages, tones, pheromonal bursts, and telepathic murmurs, a tapestry of old alliances, fraying at the seams. Elias stood in the center delegation circle beside Admiral Lyra Chen and Dr. Marin Cade. Ambassador Ridhull occupied a position slightly ahead of them, his crest dim, his posture taut with tension. When the presiding chancellor struck the resonance gong, the hall quieted to a stillness so complete Elias felt his pulse echo in his skull. Let the convocation begin, the chancellor intoned. Her voice resonated through the chamber, amplified by ancient acoustic stone. We gather under the shadow of crisis. The Astra wells fail. The star lanes falter. And humanity has undertaken an act that has shaken the pillars of this alliance. A low murmur rolled through the hall. The Hope Engine, she continued, her tone heavy, a construct capable of drawing psychic energy from a sentient species, a construct that, if reports are correct, has already siphoned emotional essence from its own volunteers. Whispers, gasps, chittering outrage. Elias stepped forward. He felt Lyra's steady presence behind him, Marin's sharpened focus beside him. This was not merely politics, it was judgment. Ridhull bowed slightly to the chancellor. Honored counsel, as representative of the Thrail Dominion and witness to the Hope Engine's initial activation, I testify thus, humanity has built a weapon of the soul. More murmurs. A few species gave soft cries of dismay. It is not a weapon, Marin said sharply. Ridhull turned to face her, and Elias saw grief, not anger, in his eyes. What else can drain the spirit of a people? What else can draw their inner fire to fuel a machine? If such a device were to be turned upon other species, we have no intention, Elias began. But another representative interrupted, her iridescent fins quivering. Intentions shift, power corrupts. Your invention threatens the psychic equilibrium of every species present. A towering reptilian envoy thundered. Such a machine must be dismantled immediately. A telepathic species broadcast a wave of shared dread that made Elias' skull ache. Humanity stood alone in the center of the storm. Lyra stepped forward, voice steady. We understand your fear, but the wells are dying. Without Astra, the gates collapse. The galaxy fractures. Billions die. Humanity will not accept extinction. A crystalline envoy pulsed a cold chord. Extinction may be the natural end of a cycle. Marin spat an incredulous laugh. Natural? There is nothing natural about watching systems crumble because the universe is running out of fuel. Ridhull faced Elias directly. And so you steal from the hearts of your own kind. You build a device that takes hope, the most intimate force a species possesses. We borrow it, Elias said quietly. Hope borrowed is hope lost, Ridhull countered. What happens when the well runs dry? Elias felt the question like a blade against his ribs. He remembered the datapad's verdict, hope, finite, but the galaxy didn't need to know that. Not now. Not when panic would doom everyone faster than the wells. The chancellor raised a hand. Humanity will present its defense. Afterward, the Alliance will vote. Marin nodded to Elias. This was his burden. He stepped into the central circle. The holographic projection of the Hope engine rose into view above him, its radiant form slowly rotating, casting latticework shadows across his face. He spoke. When the gates were discovered thousands of years ago, when the first sentient beings dared to step through the fabric of space, our ancestors believed Astra to be eternal. They built worlds, cultures, cities across the galaxy. They planted roots in places their hearts had not yet learned to love. He looked around at the gathered species, letting his gaze meet each in turn. But now Astra dies, the gates fail. We face not only logistic collapse, but spiritual collapse, isolation, fragmentation. The unraveling of everything this convocation has worked to build. Marin stepped up, projecting equations and graphs in the air. Astra entropy is accelerating. There is no natural replenishment. The wells do not regenerate. Our models show the collapse is universal, not regional. A soft wave of fear rippled across the hall. Elias gestured to the engine projection. This machine is not a weapon, it is a lifeline. It uses the unique properties of human emotional resonance to generate Astra. A small draw, a temporary drain, in exchange for stability for the entire galaxy. A serpentine envoy hissed, a small drain now, and later, Elias held his ground. Later, we improve, we refine, we reduce the cost. This is the beginning, not the end. A crystalline species chimed. What if your species becomes dependent upon emotional harvest? What if hope becomes currency? What if those in power decide that others must pay? Elias flinched. Not because the accusation was unfounded, but because he had wondered the same in the dark of night. Before he could speak, Marin stepped forward. We will institute ethical protocols, council oversight. Unacceptable, roared a feathered envoy. No species should command the hopes of another. Ridhill stepped to the Chancellor's side. We propose a full embargo on the Hope engine. All construction must cease. Humanity must shut it down. Lyra's voice cut through the hall like a blade. And what then? Wait quietly as the gates collapse. Watch your worlds fade into isolation. How many children must die in darkened colonies before you accept that doing nothing is also a choice? You dare to threaten, the reptilian envoy began. I'm stating a fact, Lyra growled. The Chancellor struck the gong again. Order, the hall settled. Elias spoke softly, but his voice carried. We stand at the edge of night. Humanity has found a spark, a dangerous one, yes, but a spark that could hold back the dark. We ask not for fear, but for understanding. We cannot save the galaxy with good intentions alone. We need action, we need risk. Ridhill's crest lowered until it nearly touched his shoulders. And what of the cost? What of the souls you drain? Elias inhaled slowly. He saw in his mind the volunteers, their hopeful eyes, their trembling hands, their belief in something greater. They give hope, he said. They are not robbed of it. Ridhill's voice was barely a whisper. You tell yourself that to sleep at night. The Chancellor paused for several long seconds. Then she spoke. The Alliance will now vote. The vote took 2 hours. Silence suffocated the hall as names were called, positions announced. One by one, condemnation, abstention, withdrawal from Alliance structures, formal protest, support with conditions, condemnation. Elias felt sweat gather beneath his collar. Marin stared straight ahead, jaw tight. Lyra's fists clenched at her sides. At last, the Chancellor delivered the verdict. By majority vote, the Alliance condemns the construction and operation of the Hope engine. Humanity is ordered to cease all activities related to the device. Gasps, murmurs, a few cries of triumph, more cries of fear. Then, furthermore, the Chancellor continued, voice heavy, until compliance is demonstrated, the Alliance will enact a blockade around the Vaskra 9 facility. No supplies, personnel, or vessels may enter or leave. Lyra sucked in a sharp breath. Marin whispered, they're cutting us off. Elias felt his heart strike like a hammer. They're desperate. They're afraid, Ridhill corrected. He looked at Elias one last time, and in that moment every shared conversation, every late-night debate, every moment of trust between them seemed to crumble like sand. I begged you, Ridhill said softly. I begged you to stop. Elias swallowed. And doom the galaxy. Ridhill's eyes shimmered, not with anger, but with unbearable sorrow. Better a galaxy that dies with its soul intact than one that lives through theft. He turned and walked away. Elias felt something inside him twist, break, and smolder. Ridhill had once said humans were dangerous because they hoped too brightly. Now he feared they would burn the stars themselves to keep that hope alive. Humanity responded to the blockade as humans always had, not with surrender, with determination sharpened by fear. The blockade formed swiftly, with dozens of alien ships positioning themselves along the approaches to Vaskra 9. They broadcast constant warnings: cease operations, power down the Hope engine, submit to inspection. Inside the facility, chaos erupted. Access codes changed hourly, security drills intensified, every corridor buzzed with tension. Volunteers were escorted under guard to ensure their safety. Technicians whispered about sabotage. Military personnel monitored orbital movements around the clock. Lyra took command of defense coordination. Marin buried herself in optimization algorithms. Elias took on diplomacy because someone had to face the storm. He contacted alien representatives daily, pleading, arguing, explaining. But every conversation went the same way. You are draining the essence of your own species. We are preventing collapse. You are committing spiritual genocide. We are buying you time. You cannot stabilize the universe by consuming your own hearts. Then what do you propose, because the wells are dying now? His pleas fell into silence or hostility. The more he talked, the more he realized. To alien ears, human logic sounded mad. A people willing to extract hope from themselves? Worse, a people proud of it? It was like watching someone willingly bleed into a machine. No wonder they recoiled. 2 weeks into the blockade, sabotage attempts began. The first was subtle. An encrypted data packet slipped into the engine's calibration scripts. A skilled technician caught it by chance. The second attempt was physical. A disguised maintenance drone tried to overload a conduit junction. Lyra's security team intercepted it in time, but only barely. By the fourth attempt, Elias realized the truth. Someone wanted the engine destroyed, and not merely disabled, obliterated. He was summoned to the command center late at night. Lyra stood before a hologram displaying interception logs. 3 confirmed sabotage attempts from outside, she said. 2 from inside. Elias stiffened. Inside? Someone on our team is passing data to the blockade. Marin stormed into the room. We knew this would happen. Fear breeds betrayal. Lyra corrected her coldly. Fear breeds survival instincts. That's different. Marin pushed past them. This is why we must accelerate the schedule. Elias frowned. Marin, no. If we push too hard, we don't have a choice, she snapped. The blockade squeezes tighter every day. Supplies will run out. Our anchors can't remain on site forever. We must move to full activation within the month. That's madness, Elias said. That's necessary, Marin countered. Lyra looked between them. If the Alliance forces breach the perimeter, they will destroy the engine. You know that. Elias sank into a chair, feeling the weight of a world on his shoulders. What happens when the engine activates at full scale? The draw on hopeful states? We'll manage it, Marin insisted. I saw the projections, Elias whispered. It could cripple the emotional resilience of thousands. Better a diminished people than a dead species, Marin said coldly. Elias stared at her. Who was this person? Had the pressure twisted her? Or had this ruthlessness always been at her core? Lyra placed a hand on Elias' arm. If we don't activate soon, we die. You know it. I know it. Even Ridhull knows it. Elias wanted to argue, wanted to say hope was too precious, too sacred to be spent like coin. But then he remembered Hallion. He remembered the dying gate. He remembered the little girl who said she had so much hope she wanted to give it away. And he realized something terrible. He cared more about saving that child and all the children like her than he cared about preserving himself. Hope might be finite, but he would spend every last grain of it to keep humanity alive, even if the galaxy hated them for it. He stood, shoulders squared. We proceed, Elias said, voice steady despite the tremor in his chest. But we control the draw. We monitor volunteers continuously. We do this carefully. Marin exhaled, half relief, half triumph. Then let's prepare. Outside the thick hull of the facility, the stars burned cold and distant. And around Vaskra 9, the alien blockade tightened like a noose made of fear. As the month wore on, the alliance fractured visibly. Some species withdrew from diplomatic channels entirely. Others sent desperate pleas for compromise. A few broke ranks quietly, offering humanity secret support. One message came from the Anshari communion: we do not condone your engine, but neither can we condemn your will to survive. Do what you must. We will not act against you. Another came from the Delthari, a telepathic race. You humans grasp at life with terrifying passion. Your hope burns too bright. We fear it. We envy it. We cannot stand beside you, but we will not strike you. Others, however, sharpened their blades. The Juthar swarm sent a formal declaration: terminate the Hope engine or face military enforcement. Ridhull sent a personal message to Elias. The words were simple. Please stop. Before hope becomes something we fear, not cherish. Elias read the message 3 times. He wrote no reply. Representatives from human colonies, scientific committees, military factions, and philosophical sects gathered around a long obsidian table. Marin stood before them like a prophet before judgment. Lyra stood beside her like a shield raised against the end of days. Elias stood slightly apart, torn between the two halves of his duty. "We all know why we're here," Marin began. "The Alliance has condemned us. The blockade tightens. Sabotage continues. If we do not activate the Hope engine soon, the Vaskra 9 facility will fall." An elder from the Hellion Order spoke. "And if we activate it, we drain our humanity." Marin did not flinch. "Better drained than dead." A philosopher raised a trembling hand. "If hope is finite, we risk creating a species that cannot dream." Lyra replied, "If we fail, there will be no species left to dream at all." A political envoy said, "We are risking war with the entire Alliance." Elias finally spoke. "We are already at war," he said softly. "Not with other species, but with time, with entropy, with the collapse of everything that binds this galaxy together." He stepped closer to the table. "I have walked dying worlds. I have seen children asking their parents why stars grow colder. I have watched entire colonies fade into silence. The universe does not care if we live or die, so we must care enough for ourselves." Silence. Then Marin asked, "All those in favor of continuing?" Hands rose, slowly, then more confidently. All opposed, fewer hands this time, but the sorrow in their eyes lingered like a bruise. Elias closed his eyes. The decision was made. History shifted. Hope became currency. As the council dismissed, Elias lingered alone in the chamber. Ridhel appeared in the doorway not physically, but as a holographic projection carried by encrypted link. "Elias Verdane," he said quietly. "I did not expect you to vote to proceed." Elias approached the projection. "I didn't vote, they voted without me." "But you will lead the activation," Ridhel said. Elias hesitated, then nodded. Ridhel's voice trembled. "Do you understand what you are doing? You are tearing the heart from your own species. You are forcing hope into the shape of fuel." Elias whispered, "We don't have a choice." "You always have a choice," Ridhel said. "This is the path you choose." Elias felt tears sting his eyes, but he blinked them away. "If I don't lead this, someone careless will. Someone cruel. I must be there to safeguard what little soul we have left." Ridhel closed his eyes. "Then I mourn you. I mourn the man you were." The hologram faded. The alliance fractured. And Elias Verdane became something new, a symbol of the dangerous resolve of humanity. The man who would burn his own hope to save a dying galaxy. Elias stood beneath the towering lattice of crystal and metal. The lights pulsed around him like a heartbeat. Vibrations thrummed through the floor, not yet active but eager. The Hope engine was waiting. Marin approached quietly. "We begin activation protocol in 3 days." Lyra stepped to his other side. "We will protect the facility until then." Elias stared up at the impossible machine. He knew, with a cold clarity, that this decision would haunt the galaxy for millennia. But he also knew, as surely as he knew his own name, that he would rather damn himself than watch humanity fade into darkness. He whispered to the engine, "Let this work, and let the cost fall on me." He felt something shift inside him, a boundary, a vow, a weight settling into place. Elias Verdane had crossed the final threshold. The fracture in the alliance was complete, and the Hope engine stirred. On the morning they chose to wound the soul of a species, dawn on Vaskra 9 came late. The star rose through a haze of fine rust-colored dust, turning the horizon the color of old blood. The light that spilled across the basalt plains was thin and tired, as if even the sun were reluctant to bear witness to what was about to happen. But humanity came anyway. They arrived in shuttles and cargo barges, in patched refugee craft and sleek envoy vessels that had burned the last of their transit allowances to be here. They marched in caravans from makeshift camps, descended in orderly columns from orbital platforms, streamed in chaotic clusters from overcrowded transports. By mid-morning, the plains around the Hope engine facility had become an ocean of bodies. Hundreds of thousands, then millions. A seething, shivering, praying, shouting mass pressed up against barricades of armored alloy and humming shield emitters. From above, the crowd looked like a living ring thrown around the great circular complex, as if the world itself had grown an iris around its wounded eye. Hand-painted banners rippled in the thin wind. "Light the engine, we will not go quietly, save the gates, save US others bore darker pleas. Do not steal our spirit souls, are not fuel, God does not live in machines." Some drew the old gate symbol, a circle bisected by a vertical line of light. Others drew a circle hollowed out, the line broken. At the outer edges, where the noise dimmed and the dust settled more thickly, there were circles of kneeling figures, prayer groups, heads bowed, fingers intertwined. Their murmurs rose and fell like the sighing of a tired sea. The air was full of voices. My brother died when the Lorien Gate failed. They say it will drain us all. I don't care what it costs, I just want my children to see another world. If they tamper with hope, it will damn us. The Council has abandoned us. Maybe this is the only way. Above it all, beyond the pale sky, alien ships hung in orbit, blockade vessels drawn from a dozen species, their silhouettes grim against the void. They had come, they said, to prevent an atrocity. From the ground, they looked like a ring of black stones waiting to be hurled. Elias Verdane watched the gathering from a high observation gallery built into the facility's inner wall. The armored glass before him showed the plains from horizon to horizon. The crowds, the flicker of banners, the restless movement of bodies hemmed in by barricades and armed security. They came, he said quietly. Admiral Lyra Chen stood at his shoulder, arms folded, armor sealed save for her helmet. You didn't think they would? I thought, he shook his head. I thought fear would keep them away. Lyra's mouth twitched in something like a smile. You're a terrible judge of human stubbornness. It's not just humans, Elias said, nodding toward the sky. They came too. The blockade ships glittered like teeth around the planet. Somewhere up there, he knew Ambassador Ridhull was watching as well. They had not spoken since the convocation's end. There were only so many times you could tell a friend you were about to do something unforgivable before the word friend stopped fitting. Lyra followed his gaze. They're afraid of what we might do, she said. The aliens, the Council, Ridhull. They're not wrong to be afraid, Elias murmured. She studied his face. If you want to back out, this is the last easy moment to do it. He thought of Halion 3 and the other dying worlds, of dimming gates and empty docks, of a little girl on a street staring up at a glowing sigil and asking if the roads between stars could really vanish. No, he said, there are no easy moments anymore. Lyra nodded once. Then we start. Inside the engine complex, the air hummed with quiet dread. The central chamber had been transformed since the early tests, no longer a bare lattice of scaffolding and unfinished circuits, but a completed edifice of crystal and metal, a structure so intricate it almost defied the eye. It was, Elias thought, both shrine and machine, a geometry of desperation. Concentric rings of crystalline towers encircled a central core that rose from the floor like the spine of some colossal animal. Fine silvery conduits webbed between the structures, each strand etched with microfilaments designed to carry the faintest signals of human emotion. At rest, the whole thing glowed with a faint interluminescence, as if reflecting the light of stars that did not exist here. It looked beautiful. It looked like a mistake. Volunteers waited at the chamber's periphery. The Hope anchors had gathered quietly, 32 of them, in sealed suits with neural interface bands resting at their throats. Their faces were bare, though. Those who gave their inner lives to a machine, Elias had argued, deserved the dignity of being seen. He walked among them. Dr. Verdane, a man with one prosthetic arm and burn scars across half his face, saluted awkwardly. Thank you for letting me be part of this. You shouldn't be thanking me, Elias said. The man shrugged. Lost my wife when the Myrix Gate collapsed. If this stops someone else from standing in a docking bay waiting for someone who will never arrive, he shrugged again, then take what's left of my hoping. A woman with tired eyes and a soft voice said, I'm from a planet that's already been cut off once in our history. Took us 5 generations to see another sky. I don't want that for my grandchildren. An old anchor with white hair touched Elia's sleeve. I have spent my whole life hoping for others, she said. Children, students, neighbors, strangers, let this be the last thing I give. He had no words for her. Last came a woman in her 30s with a child at her side. The girl's cheeks were smudged with dust. Her eyes were bright. Elias recognized her at once. You were at the wall, he said, with the painted symbol. She nodded. You told me you were going to keep the lights on. The girl looked up at him. Is this the day you fix the gates? I hope so, Elias said. The girl frowned. It feels strange, she said slowly. Do you feel it, like the air is waiting? Elias did feel it, the charged silence, the sense of standing at the lip of a vast, unseen drop. Yes, he said, I feel it. The child took her mother's hand. Come back with your laugh, she whispered. Her mother swallowed hard, then stepped toward the other anchors. As she walked away, the girl tugged Elia's sleeve one last time. It feels, she said quietly, like we're going to lose something we can't get back. The words drove into him like a nail. We'll try, he managed. We'll try not to lose what matters. She nodded solemnly, as if this were the best answer anyone could give. Doctor. Marin Cade stood at the high-control dais, surrounded by floating holoscreens and real-time telemetry. Her fingers shook as she adjusted inputs and recalibrated subroutines, but her voice was steady when she spoke. Primary resonance lattice stabilized, she reported. Neural conduits at idle readiness. Emotional flux monitors online. Anchor biometrics within acceptable ranges. Lyra took her place at the tactical console along the side wall, overseeing security and external communications. Her armor loomed like a dark silhouette against the glitter of the engine. Elias climbed the short steps to stand beside Marin. The central interface stone waited before him, a smooth slab of supercooled crystal keyed to his neural signature. When he touched it, the engine would listen to him more closely than it listened to anyone else. Last chance, Marin said quietly, not looking up from her displays. If you say the word, I'll abort. No, you won't, Elias said, equally soft. You'll just find another way. Her lips twitched. Then say the word for my conscience. He thought of Ridhul's last message, please stop. Before hope becomes something we fear, not cherish, he thought of the alliance vote, the blockade, the failing wells. We can't stop, he said, but we can try not to become the thing they accuse us of being. Marin nodded once. Then let's begin. She activated the intercom. All anchor units prepare for synchronization. Please step into your designated nodes and place your hands on the contact surfaces. Breathe deeply. Focus on the reasons you volunteered, the memories that give you strength, the futures you want to see. In the chamber below, the anchors moved into position around the central core, each stepping onto a raised platform where crystalline arcs curved around them. They placed their palms against pale surfaces that lit up in response to their touch. Elias saw one anchor close his eyes and murmur a prayer. Another smiled faintly, as if imagining a distant sun. The wind outside howled against the walls. The crowd's noise became a muffled roar. The engine hummed, as if clearing its throat. Emotional resonance rising, Marin said, watching the graphs climb. We're seeing hope state intensification in all anchors. Elias placed his hand on the command interface. The crystal warmed beneath his skin, recognizing him. This was his design, his equations, his sin. Begin low-level synchronization, he said. Marin's fingers danced. The engine responded. The first sense of connection was not visual, it was felt. A shiver in the air, an almost imperceptible pulling in the chest. The crystals in the towers brightened, each one sending thin beams of light into the central core. The neural conduits lit in cascading patterns, like veins filling with luminous blood. Anchors stiffened as the system linked to their neural bands, their brainwaves aligned in complex harmonics. The monitors filled with overlapping curves of emotional flux. How do you feel? Elias asked through the intercom. A young man answered, voice shaky but odd. Warm. Another said, like someone is listening very closely inside my head. A third whispered, like all the times I believed we'd make it are standing in a line. Marin nodded. Flux within predicted parameters. Begin phase 2 amplification. Very slow ramp. The engine's hum deepened. A gentle pressure spread through the chamber like the air itself had gained weight. Anchor's vitals spiked. Heart rates up. Endorphins rising. Neural networks glowing in synchronized patterns. Hope state intensity at 20%, Marin reported. 30, 40. The containment chambers along the outer ring trembled. A faint haze appeared within them, at first only a ghost of something unseen, then a shimmering mist. Astra, raw, newborn Astra. Formation confirmed, Marin breathed. We're pulling it. Oh, Elias, we're really pulling it. Keep the ramp slow, he said. He watched the anchors closely. At first, their faces were serene. Eyes closed, mouths softened in half-smiles, as if remembering the best days of their lives. Then, slowly, expressions began to strain. Brows furrowed, throats tightened. Fingers contracted against the crystal. Draw rate at 60% of phase target, Marin said. We're still, without warning, the engine surged. Numbers spiked. The hum leapt an octave. The entire chamber vibrated. What was that? Lyra barked. Feedback loop, Marin cried. The resonance field just found a higher harmonic, output jumped. The haze in the Astra chambers collapsed into dense, swirling clouds of brilliant blue-white energy. Astra poured in like a waterfall of light. Anchors gasped. One clutched his chest. Something's pulling, another whimpered. It's taking everything bright. Elias slammed his palm harder onto the interface. Reduce draw, cut amplification by 30%. Marin's hands flew. The engine is compensating. It's trying to maintain the field. Force the shutdown, Lyra shouted. Before, the anchors screamed, all at once. The sound was like nothing Elias had ever heard. Not physical agony, not fear, something deeper. Ripped, the engine blazed, the chamber shook. Dust fell from the ceiling in a fine brown rain. Astra roared into the containment rings, overloading buffers, forcing emergency vent systems to redirect excess energy into deep ground sinks. Neural saturation, Marin yelled. They're at maximum threshold. Break the link, Elias shouted. I'm trying, her voice cracked. It's holding them. The machine did not want to let go. For a heartbeat 2-5, it continued to drink. Elias felt it tug at him as well, a cool pressure at the back of his mind, like fingers testing the edge of his thoughts. You, it seemed to murmur, you burn brighter. You, he gritted his teeth. Not yet, he thought, not like this. Override, he roared. Emergency cascade shutdown, code Verdane 7? His signature, hardwired into the deepest control layers, finally caught. The engine shuddered. Light pulsed once, twice, stuttered, then dropped. The hum died. The chandeliers of crystal dimmed to a sullen glow. The conduits went dark. The anchors collapsed like puppets with cut strings. Silence fell, thick and trembling, broken only by the quick, panicked breaths of the living. Outside, the effect came like a change in weather. The first wave was nothing anyone could name, just a sudden heaviness in the chest, a hitch and a laugh, a pause in the middle of a word as a thought vanished halfway formed. Then came the second wave. People looked up from their arguments, their prayers, their protests, frowning. Something inside felt thinner. A street preacher fell silent mid-sermon, staring at his own hands. A group of teenagers who'd been shouting slogans so loudly their voices cracked all stopped at once and stared dumbly at their banners. A couple who had come to beg for a second child found themselves holding each other with a sadness they couldn't explain. What was that? Someone whispered. I feel like I dropped something. A woman clutched her chest. I was remembering my wedding day and suddenly it's just flat. A young boy looked up at the sky, eyes wide with frightened wonder. Mama, it feels like the stars just moved further away. And somewhere near the barricades, the little girl from the gate wall tugged her father's sleeve. Papa, she said softly, it feels like we're losing something we can't get back. He knelt, heart pounding. What do you mean? She shook her head, tears gathering. It was warm, and now it's gone, like when you wake up from a dream and can't remember it. He held her tightly, staring toward the facility with a dawning terror that had nothing to do with bombs or guns. Up in orbit, alien ships rocked as their crews felt a similar unease. Telepaths flinched at a psychic ripple of hollowness. Empathic species tasted sudden blandness in the shared emotional field. Even more stoic species felt an indefinable dimming. Sensor arrays confirmed what instinct already shouted. There had been a disturbance, not localized, not physical. Something had tugged at hope. Alliance channels erupted. They activated the machine. Civilian populations report synchronous emotional depressions. This is an assault on sentient integrity. They have weaponized the spirit. A calm but shaking voice cut through on priority bands, Ambassador Ridhull. To all blockade units, prepare for enforcement contingency. The Hope engine has accounted itself a hazard. Humanity has crossed a forbidden threshold. In the engine chamber, medics swarmed among the anchors. They were alive, but changed. Elias moved among them like a ghost, his feet heavy, his chest tight. One man stared past him, eyes unfocused. It's quiet, he murmured. Too quiet. What's quiet? Elias asked. The place where I used to feel tomorrow. A woman clutched at his sleeve. My son's face, I can see it, but I can't feel what I used to feel when I thought about him. Why can't I reach it? The old grandmother who had spoken of giving her whole life's hope smiled faintly through tears. It took my best days, she whispered. I remember them, but they're like paintings now. I can't step inside them. He knelt beside her. I'm so sorry. Don't be, she said. I gave them freely. I only hope they went somewhere that matters. He had no answer. Marin stumbled down from the control dais, pale, sweat-slicked. We stabilized 3 containment wells, she said numbly. Output exceeded projection by a factor of 4. We created enough Astra to keep a dozen major gates running for years. Elias, do you understand what that means? He stood slowly. Yes, he said. It means the machine works. His gaze swept over the anchors. And it means we have created a way to wound the core of what it means to be human. Marin flinched. It's not permanent, they'll recover. Some will, Elias said. Some won't, and even for those who do, what have we taught ourselves? That we can reach into our own hearts and pull out the best parts to burn. Lyra stomped up, helmet now sealed at her belt. Her jaw was set like cut stone. The blockade is preparing to fire, she said. We intercepted their last communication. They consider this an act of psychic aggression. Did we broadcast anything beyond the facility? Elias asked sharply. Nothing intentional, Lyra said, but whatever happened in here, it echoed. Marin stared at the engine, horror and fascination warring on her face. We tapped into something bigger than we expected. The anchor's hope created a field that brushed against the general psyche. The effects spread. That means we can hurt people who never volunteered, Lyra cut in. You realize that, yes, Marin closed her eyes. We can't stop, not now, not when we know it works. We'll refine, we'll focus, we'll isolate the draw. Elias shook his head. We can keep lying to ourselves if that helps. She rounded on him. You think this is easy for me? You think I enjoy watching them suffer? I think, Elias said quietly, you believe that suffering is the only path left to meaning. He turned to the engine. It stood quiet now, but not innocent. The memory of its hunger hung in the air like ozone after lightning. During the surge, he had felt it reach for him, not metaphorically, directly. His emotional pattern had lit up across the field, bright, dense, sharp. The engine had recognized him as a locus of belief, of stubborn refusal. Its pull had brushed his mind like a river tasting a new bank. He understood something then, something he had known in equations but not in his bones. This machine would not survive on scattered donors. It would destroy too many, leave too many hollow, shred the fabric of society even as it shored up the gates. To function at the scale needed, to stabilize not just a few lifelines but the whole frail web of civilization, it would need a single, continuous, immense source. One anchor. Not 32. Not 3,000. One. Lyra seemed to read some of this in his expression. Her eyes narrowed. What are you thinking? He didn't answer right away. On the monitors, external feeds flickered with images from the planes, crowds wilting, faces blank, a wave of heaviness moving outward like shock rings from an unseen impact. Above, blockade ships turned slowly, bringing weapon arrays to bear. Elias looked at the Astra wells. They glowed with contained light, priceless, impossible, world-saving light. Then he looked at the anchors, shivering, hollowed out, clinging to one another with the instinctive desperation of those who felt the ground give way beneath them. I'm thinking, he said slowly, that we can't do this again, not like this. Marin's head snapped up. We must. The next wave will be smoother. The system will have adapted. The system adapted, Elias said. It learned to pull harder. Lyra took a step closer. What's the alternative? He swallowed. There isn't one, he said. Not if we keep trying to feed it with many. Marin's eyes flashed. Then what? He looked at her, then at Lyra. A single anchor, he whispered. One mind. One reservoir of hope strong enough to sustain the engine without ripping thousands apart. Marin stared at him as if he'd suggested tearing out the station's core to patch a hull breach. That's impossible, she said. No one has that much, she stopped. Understanding hit her like a blow. Lyra saw it too. Her face went very still. No, she said at once. Absolutely not, don't even think it. I've been thinking it since the first test, Elias said quietly. I just didn't admit it. You're not serious, Marin said. Elias, you cannot. He looked back at the engine. He thought of all the years he had spent refusing to give up. Of every sleepless night spent chasing impossible numbers, of every time he had chosen fight over surrender, of every quiet, stubborn, irrational certainty that humanity would find a way. He had always carried too much hope. People had told him so. Idealist, fanatic, fool. Now, for the first time, that excess felt like more than a character flaw. It felt like a resource. I don't know if it will work, Elias said, but I know this. If we keep doing it this way, we will hollow out our people faster than Astra can save them. We will win the war against entropy and lose the war for our own souls. Lyra seized his arm. And you think putting yourself in that machine will fix that? I think, he said, that if someone must be emptied, it should be one who chose this path, who built this mistake, who cannot watch it be used carelessly. Marin shook her head violently. No, Elias, you are not some martyr to be poured into your own engine. Then who? He asked gently. Who would you choose? A conscript, a random volunteer, a committee? She had no answer. Lyra's fingers dug into his sleeve. We will find another solution, she said. There's always another solution. Not always, Elias said. Sometimes there's only the least terrible one. A chiming tone cut through the thick air. An officer at the communications panel called, incoming transmission from blockade leadership. Priority demand. Lyra swore under her breath. Put it through. The main holoscreen lit. Ambassador Ridhull's face appeared, lined with more grief than Elias had ever seen. Beside him stood the reptilian Juthar general and the crystalline envoy, both hard-eyed and rigid. Humanity, Ridhull said, his voice quiet but carrying. We felt what your machine did today, across fleets. Across worlds. He swallowed. It hurt, he said simply. Even those who did not know why felt it. Children cried. Cities grew quiet. Among my own people, some fell into stillness that has not yet lifted. Elias closed his eyes. I told them it was an accident, Ridhul continued. I told them you did not mean to injure the galaxy's heart, but intention does not erase impact. The Juthar general's voice rumbled. Deactivate the Hope engine. Destroy its core. Hand the facility over to Alliance supervision. Do this, or we will remove the threat by force. Marin's jaw clenched. If we destroy the engine, the gates fail. The wells die. We all face the last quiet together. Better together, the crystalline envoy said, than under the shadow of a species that has learned to rob the future from its own hearts. Ridhul looked directly at Elias through the projection. Please, he said, stop, before hope becomes something we fear. Before your name is written in history as the man who taught the galaxy that even the most sacred thing can be turned into fuel. Elias swallowed. His throat hurt. I can't stop, he said, voice hoarse. Not completely, not while there's a chance to save them. Them? Ridhul asked. Or you? Both, Elias whispered. The Juthar general cut in. You have one planetary cycle to comply. After that, we will consider the Hope engine an enemy installation. The transmission cut. The room was very, very quiet. Lyra exhaled slowly. Well, there it is. Marin looked at Elias, eyes wild. We can't bow to them, not now, not when we're this close. Lyra rubbed her temples. If they open fire, we're dead. Engine, crew, anchors, everyone out there in the crowd. They'll scorch the whole site if that's what it takes. Then we move faster, Marin said. Full-scale activation. Stabilize the networks. Once the gates are secure, they won't dare destroy the only thing keeping them connected. At what price? Elias asked. She stared at him. At the price we agreed to pay the moment we started this, she said. At the price of doing something terrible so that something worse doesn't happen. He thought of the girl's words. It feels like we're going to lose something we can't get back. He thought, with a clarity that stole his breath, we already have. Not all of it, not yet, but a piece. And the engine would ask for more. He looked again at the towering lattice. He felt its quiet attention on him now, as if some subtle alignment of fields had turned to focus on the bright knot of defiance inside his chest. He'd always been told he hoped too much. Perhaps this was why. Perhaps the universe had been waiting for someone foolish enough to keep believing, even when belief had no right to stand. Elias Verdane straightened. I'll review the resonance models, he said. If a single anchor configuration is even possible, I'll find a way to make it work. Marin seized his arm. I won't let you. He gave her a tired, almost gentle smile. You won't be able to stop me, he said. Not if there's no other way. Lyra's voice was rough. And if there is another way, then I'll be the last to step into that chamber, he replied. But someone will. The engine will see to that. Better a volunteer who understands what it means than someone pressed into service by panic. He took a step toward the exit, shoulders heavy but strangely steady. Extraction Day had proved two things beyond doubt. The Hope engine worked, and its price was monstrous. Now the galaxy would decide whether to destroy it, and he would decide whether to feed it one last time with everything he had. On the plains outside, the crowd shifted uneasily under the dimming sky. In orbit, fleets turned like dark shoals, teeth bared. And in the hush between one choice and the next, a small girl clutched her father's hand and whispered again, as if she could feel a future rushing toward her that she did not yet have words for. It feels like we're losing something we can't get back. Her father held her close. I hope, he said, voice breaking, someone knows what they're doing in there. Elias heard none of this. But as he walked alone down a silent corridor toward the heart of his own creation, he felt the weight of millions of such hopes settle upon him like a cloak. He did not shrug it off. He wrapped it tighter. Because if hope had to be spent, then let it be spent by one who had carried too much of it for far too long. And the Hope engine, quiet now, but waiting, seemed almost to shiver in anticipation. In the days after Extraction Day, the sky above Vaskra 9 filled with teeth. Ships of the alien coalition hung in orbit like a necklace of dark stones, cruisers of the crystal-bodied Rel, knife-shaped destroyers from the Juthar swarm, vast living bioships of the Anasari communion, all arrayed in a ring around the bruised planet. Their drives burned cold. Their weapons glowed and flexed. Their sensor arrays stared, unblinking, at the single scar of machine light on the world below. At the center of that ring, defended by a scattering of human ships and a cloud of drones, lay the Hope engine. To some, it was the last light of the age. To others, it was a torch held too close to the fabric of the world. Either way, the galaxy had decided it was too dangerous to be left alone. The siege had begun. Elias Verdane stood in the upper command gallery of the engine complex, watching the tactical holo as the blockade tightened. Human ships, fewer, smaller, patched together from scavenged parts and half a dozen different naval traditions, drifted in a defensive shell around the station. Their captains knew they were outnumbered and outgunned. They also knew there was nowhere left to fall back to. "This is the last port," Lyra Chen had told them. "There's nothing behind us but collapse." Some of them had laughed when she said it, not because it was funny, but because when there was nothing left to retreat to, gallows humor was the last shield anyone had. Now, as Elias watched the encircling fleets adjust their orbits, that laughter felt a very long way away. ACOM's officer glanced over his shoulder. "Blockade vessels have shifted to siege posture. No more hails, no more warnings." Lyra stepped up beside Elias, armor sealed, helmet tucked under one arm. Her eyes were flint. "They've passed the talking stage," she said. "They passed it the day they saw what the engine could do," Elias murmured. Marin Cade's voice crackled over the internal network. "Elias, I need you in the core lab, now." He tore his eyes from the display and followed the route he knew by heart through the facility's guts. As he walked, he could feel the mood in the corridors, strained, brittle, stretched thin. Technicians moved with tense purpose, clutching data pads like lifelines. Security squads passed at a jog, weapons ready, armor scuffed. Volunteers, anchors who had survived the first extraction, sat in quiet alcoves, eyes dim, watching him pass with an unreadable mixture of hope and dread. A poster someone had taped to a bulkhead caught his eye. It showed a crude sketch of the engine's towers, ringed by stars. Underneath, in a child's uneven hand, "Keep the ROADS open." The paper trembled with the vibration of distant drives. The core lab was dim, lit mostly by the cold radiance of hollow displays. Marin stood at the center, barefoot on the metal grating, hair wild, eyes bloodshot. Her fingers flew through projections, graphs, field maps, neural correlation schematics, dragging one into another, overlaying results, cross-checking numbers. On the main display, a new curve burned upward like a rising scream. "What did you find?" Elias asked. Marin didn't answer immediately. She looked thinner than he remembered, as if the last few days had scraped her down to wire and resolve. "You were right," she said at last. He almost wished she'd yelled at him. "About what?" he asked carefully. She gestured at the primary graph. "Hope degradation. I fed the extraction day data into the old models, recalibrated the flux coefficients, accounted for the psychic ripple we saw in the external population. The engine doesn't just drain anchors. It reshapes the entire emotional field around it." He stepped closer. "That's not new, we saw hints of. It's not linear," Marin cut in. "We assumed the damage scaled proportionally with draw. It doesn't. The more we pull, the faster the system collapses. Once we cross a certain threshold, hope stops regenerating at all." Elias stared at the graph. The line rose slowly at first, then sharply, until it nearly went vertical. "Show me the threshold," he said. She brought up another overlay, a dotted line across the curve. "This is the total hope mass," she said, "of baseline humanity, modeled as a field across all connected populations. This band here," she highlighted a narrow range near the top of the curve, "is the draw required to stabilize the primary gate network, just enough to keep core and intermediate lanes viable. And this," she pushed a marker past that band. The graph's tail shot into red. "Once we draw this much," she whispered, "the system tips. The human psyche loses its ability to generate positive expectation. Ambition, joy, resilience, even mild anticipation gone. People would still remember what they used to feel. They could simulate the behavior, but they wouldn't be able to reach it anymore, not in their bones." Elias swallowed. His mouth tasted of metal. "How long would it take to regenerate?" he asked, though he already feared the answer. Marin shook her head. "I ran the recovery models, factored in cultural repair, therapeutic interventions, time. With the field curvature this steep, the system doesn't bounce back. It settles into a new equilibrium, a flat line, permanent anhedonia." He stared at the word she'd written at the bottom of the graph, spiritual death. "If we fully activate with a distributed anchor network," she said quietly, "we save the gates and destroy the part of humanity that cares that we did." He closed his eyes. Outside, gates were winking out of existence. He had seen the reports. The Seraphim transit chain gone dark, the Garnet Crescent isolated, the ancient Muriel Bridge collapsing mid-transit, stranding half an armada between stars. Every hour lost meant more worlds cut off, more colonies facing famine and chaos. And here, in this lab, the only machine that could stop that unraveling showed him the bill it would demand. It was always going to cost us, Marin said. But this is worse than I thought. We can't ask that of them, Elias whispered. We can't ask a whole species to become hollow. Marin gave a broken laugh. If we don't, we ask them to die instead. Not all at once, he said. Not everywhere. Some worlds will hang on for generations. They'll grieve, but they'll still love, still fight, still sing. And the ones that don't, the ones whose gates fail next month, next week, Marin's voice sharpened. We're juggling infinities here, Elias. What's worse, to live with the lights on but the color gone, or to let the lights go out entirely? He didn't answer, because there was no answer that wasn't a wound. I also found this, she said, forcing her voice back to analytical. She brought up another sequence, the engine's internal field behavior during the extraction. In all the chaos, Marin said, I missed it, but when I slowed the data, look. The simulation ran. Anchors, emotional fields flared around the engine like petals. Then, as the draw increased, the field stretched, thinned, began to fray. At the same moment, a new pattern emerged in the center. A dense, coherent node of hope signature, burning brighter than the rest. The engine's field lines bent subtly toward it. Guess who, Marin said. Elias didn't need to. It's my pattern, he said. She nodded. You weren't even wired in. But the engine still found you. Your emotional profile has always been obnoxiously intense. You mean I'm bad at giving up, he said. I mean you're the most gravitationally stubborn optimist I've ever met, Marin said. From the engine's perspective, that's gold. It was already starting to treat you as a primary anchor, even before you plugged yourself in. She overlaid one more model. Using a single-source configuration, one anchor fully integrated changes the calculus, she said. The draw still reaches the wider field, but not the same way. Instead of hollowing many, the engine wraps around the anchor's pattern. It uses that mind as a template, a kind of emotional core for the field. The rest of humanity still contributes, but more in resonance than direct extraction. And the cost? Elias asked. She looked at him. It would destroy the anchor, she said. Not physically, necessarily, but everything inside that makes a person who they are. Every hope, every story, every memory that holds meaning. It would grind them down into fuel. Their consciousness would dissolve into the engine's ongoing state. Scraps might remain, ghosts, but the person as we understand them would be gone. And the rest of us, Elias pressed. Depleted but recoverable, Marin said. If I'm reading this right, the field impact spreads thinly. People would feel heavy, numb, but over time their hope would regrow, using the engine's imposed pattern as scaffolding. Humanity could heal. If, Elias said, we give it one person. She nodded slowly. One, she said. Someone with a ridiculous, catastrophic surplus of hope. Someone the machine has already chosen. The lab was very quiet. Somewhere in the distance, deep in the facility's bones, metal groaned under external stress as the siege tightened another notch. Elias looked at the graph with its red band labeled spiritual death, then at the overlay where his signature burned like a small, fierce sun at the engine's core. A thought came to him, unbidden, unwelcome, inevitable. Maybe you were born for this. He shoved it away. Marin's eyes shone with tears. I hate this, she said. I hate that this is the best option we have. I hate that the math says you fit the role. I hate that you're probably already thinking about it. He tried to smile. It came out weak. We opened the door, he said. Somebody has to go through. Don't you dare, she hissed. Don't you put this on fate. We built this nightmare. We chose every step. Don't pretend you were drafted by the stars. She was right. Of course she was. He placed a hand on her shoulder. If there were another way, find one, she said. They both knew he probably wouldn't. The war outside did not wait for their ethics to catch up. Within hours, gate collapse reports accelerated. The Haldoran link failed mid-evacuation, stranding 5 million refugees in a system with no habitable worlds. The twin gates of the Marimo expanse went dark, splitting an ancient culture into two halves that would never see each other again. Tactical feeds showed chaos spreading like mold through bread, riots on terminal stations, black markets for leftover Astra, religious movements declaring the last quiet as holy inevitability. Whole planetary governments transmitted desperate pleas to the Alliance for a solution. The Alliance answered by pointing at Vaskra 9 and saying, not this one. The ultimatum expired. The siege became an assault. It began in orbit. From the command balcony, Elias watched alongside Lyra as the first wave of alien strikes flowed in. Sleek Juthar ships fired lances of coherent plasma at the outer human picket line. Relian crystal barges focused high-energy beams meant not to pierce hulls, but to scramble electronics, disable defenses, blind sensors. Human captains responded like cornered animals. They weaved their underpowered ships through patterns no sane tactician would recommend, using the debris of failed civilizations as cover, scuttled cargo hulks, dead gate frames, the fractured shells of earlier battles. They launched swarms of improvised drones, some little more than armored freight pods with jury-rigged drives and explosive payloads. Space bloomed with light. Elias watched a human frigate, Courage of Dawn, take 4 hits in rapid succession. Its shields failed. Its spine snapped. Instead of falling away, it drove itself into a Relian carrier, engines flaring one last time in a suicidal burn. Both exploded together, a brief sun kindled in orbit. On the ground, the shockwave rattled cups and teeth. Lyra's jaw tightened. "That was Captain Ray's," she said. "He had a family on Grail's belt." Elias pressed his hand against the railing. "He has them still," he said quietly. "If this works." Lyra didn't answer. Another alert flashed red. "Ground forces inbound," a tactical officer called. "Dropships breaching upper atmosphere. Mixed coalition Juthar, Anasari, Velith." The aliens weren't content to hammer from orbit. They meant to cut out the heart of the machine with knives and claws if they had to. Lyra strapped on her helmet. "I'll hold the corridors," she said. "You keep the engine from eating the rest of us." He caught her arm. Lyra, her eyes, visible through the visor, were bright. "I'm a soldier," she said. "This is what I'm for. Don't cheat me of my purpose." He managed a ragged smile. "I'll try to make your job worth doing." "You'd better," she said, and was gone, her footsteps ringing down the metal walkway as squads fell in behind her. The first enemy breach came at Sector C9, a freight airlock reinforced in a hurry and never meant to withstand a full assault. Juthar boarding pods slammed into it like bullets. Their thermic cutters flared, shearing through metal and sealant. When the doors blew inward, Lyra's line was waiting. What followed blurred into brutal motion. Juthar shock troops poured through, chitinous bodies low to the ground, jaws lined with serrated bone. Human defenders met them with rifles, barricades, mines triggered at the last second by hands steady only from long habit. The corridor turned into a slaughterhouse. Elias saw only fragments on the tactical feeds. Lyra shouting orders, smoke curling up from scarred walls, bodies, human and alien, tangled in ugly configurations. He forced himself not to look away. These were the people buying minutes for his numbers. Elsewhere, an Anasari infiltration team made of luminous, jelly-like forms tried to phase through walls. Environmental controls responded by freezing whole corridors, trapping them in mid-transit, and then venting them into the thin, killing air outside. Someone on the inside tried to help them. That part burned. Security logs showed a human tech rerouting access codes, opening a side gate for incoming boarding craft. His face flashed on the feed, young, eyes wide with the certainty of someone doing something terrible for what he believed was mercy. "We can't let them keep that thing running," the tech stammered when they caught him. "I read the reports, I felt it. We can't." Lyra's people dragged him away, eyes hard. "He's not wrong," Marin muttered when Elias saw the footage. "Then why does it feel like betrayal?" he asked. "Because it cuts where we're already bleeding," she said. Steadily, inevitably, the siege squeezed closer. Outer defense platforms went silent, one by one, their signals blinking out as alien gunships cut them apart. The sky above Vaskra 9 streaked with burning debris. The Hope engine facility shuddered under repeated orbital strikes that hammered its reinforced shell. Shields flared and dimmed. Structural stress monitors edged toward red. Inside, the people closest to the machine felt something else hammering them. A rising sense of emptiness, a subtle tug at their chests as if the engine's mere presence had begun to drag on their minds even without activation. "We're reaching field resonance saturation," Marin said, staring at the numbers. "The engine is impatient." "Machines don't get impatient," Elias said automatically. "Then say the field wants to move," Marin snapped. "We've built a dam in the middle of a river. Pressure's building on both sides. Physics doesn't care whether we call it mood." On one of the hollow windows, a gate collapsed in real time. The image came from a distant relay, a great ring trembling, its aperture flickering like a candle in a hurricane. Then the pattern fell apart, the gate's inner surface twisting into chaotic fragments of spacetime before snapping back, leaving only cold, empty void. Traffic that had been en route did not emerge. Signals cut. Lives ended in places sensors could not follow. The relay feed cut to static. Elias turned away so he wouldn't be sick. "How long?" he asked. Marin's hands clenched on the console. If collapse rates hold, the primary network fails inside a year, secondary within 3, outliers already gone. And if we fire the engine at full strength? He asked. She looked at him with raw eyes. We hold the gates, she whispered. We hold the roads, but if we use many anchors, we empty the travelers. We save their bodies and lose their hearts. The model graphs hovered in the air, cold and clean. There were no clean answers, only edges. He thought of the old story his father had told him on that farm colony long ago. A flood rushing toward a village, a dam failing, a man standing with a sack of seed corn in his arms, trying to decide whether to plant it in stony ground or let it wash away. What's the point of saving seed for spring, his father had said, if there's no land left to plant in? Back then, the question had felt theoretical. Now it felt like a knife. The decision, when it came, did not arrive as a lightning bolt or a single noble declaration. It came like water finally finding the lowest point. It came after too many images of falling gates, too many reports of dead evacuees, too many glimpses of Lyra standing her ground over the bodies of good people, too many nights of watching Marin stare at impossible graphs. It came when Ridhull called, one last time. The comms officer's voice cut through the chaos. Elias, we have an incoming priority channel. It's Ambassador Ridhull requesting you specifically. Elias hesitated for only a heartbeat. Put him through, he said. Ridhull's image appeared in the air, a little grainy, filtered through layers of jamming and counter-jamming, but still unmistakable. His crest was low. His skin had taken on the muted gray-green of exhaustion in his species. Elias Verdane, he said. You look older. So do you, Elias replied. Ridhull's gaze flicked around, taking in the flickering displays, the tremors in the walls. We have little time, he said. Our fleets are committed. There are hardliners who will not stand down now, no matter what I say. You called to tell me you've lost control, Elias said. I called, Ridhull answered, to ask you to stand down before we both lose far more. Elias almost laughed. It came out as a breath. We're a few gates away from the galaxy tearing itself into islands. There's no standing down. Ridhull's voice softened. When my people tell the story of this age, Elias, I want to be able to say I tried. That I asked you one last time not to hit your species, survival to the butchery of its own spirit. Elias looked at him, really looked. He saw not an alien diplomat, not the face of an enemy blockade, but a man, another man caught between fear and duty, trying to hold a line against forces old as entropy. What would you have us do? Elias asked quietly. Wait for the last quiet with bowed heads and tidy accounts. I would have you face it with dignity, Ridhull said, not claw at the universe until you tear pieces of yourselves away. Dignity feeds no child, Elias replied. Silence comforts no mother at a darkened gate. Ridhull closed his eyes briefly, as if in pain. You are so very human. And you are so very not, Elias said, but there was no malice in it. They stared at each other for a long, strange moment. Finally, Ridhull said, if you do this, if you turn that engine on again, you will cross a threshold there is no returning from. We crossed it when we built it, Elias said. The only question left is who will pay the toll. Ridhull's voice shook. Don't make humanity pay it all. Elias swallowed. I won't, he said. The faintest hope flickered in Ridhull's eyes. Then you'll shut it down? No, Elias said. I mean I won't make all of humanity pay. Ridhull understood then. His crest rose in alarm. Elias, no, he began. The connection cut. Comms had failed, or someone had killed the channel on purpose. Elias put his hand on the console to steady himself. His reflection wavered in a darkened hollow screen, a man hollow-eyed, unshaven, carrying too much. Only someone who embodies humanity's persevering hope could serve as the anchor. He knew who that was. He hated that he knew. He left the comms bay and went to find Lyra and Marin. They met in the old briefing room, the one they'd used when this was still just a visionary project and not a war crime in progress. Lyra arrived with armor scorched and one arm in a sling, having refused treatment beyond what got her back on her feet. Marin staggered in clutching a tablet like a relic. Outside, sirens wailed as another section of the outer shell buckled under orbital fire. Elias stood at the head of the table. I've made a decision, he said. Lyra sank into a chair. Those are rarely good news coming from you. Marin hovered by the wall. If you say what I think you're going to say, I will personally sedate you and lock you in a storage closet. He smiled at that, thin and tired. I've reviewed the single anchor configuration, he said. It will work. It has the least catastrophic field impact. It preserves enough of the human emotional spectrum for regeneration. It keeps the gates open. At the cost of the anchor, Marin said. At the cost of you. Someone has to do it, Elias said. Someone else, she snapped. There is no one else, he replied. Not with the same field compatibility, not with the same binding coefficient. The engine has already keyed itself to me. If we try to force another candidate into that role, we risk killing them for nothing. Lyra stared at him. This isn't like stepping in front of a bullet, Elias. This is letting something hollow you out and use you as a scaffolding. You won't just die, you'll dissolve. I know, he said quietly. Do you? She demanded. Have you really let that land? No afterlife story, no poetic fade-out. Just a brain turned into a sort of resonant pattern generator, your memories stripped for parts, your feelings flattened into math. He flinched. I've read the models, he said. Models don't bleed, she shot back. Marin slammed her tablet on the table. You do this, and you let everyone off the hook. The council, the alliance, the clergy, all of them. They'll tell themselves the cost was paid by one hero and not by the system that drove him there. Good, Elias said. I'd rather they argued about what to do with the future than about what to do with my grave. Marin choked on a bitter laugh. Lyra leaned forward. Why you? She whispered. Why is it always you, people like you, standing at the edge of the cliff? Because people like me, Elias said, are the ones too foolish to step back. He exhaled slowly. I can't ask volunteers to go through this, he said. Not when I know exactly what it would do to them. I can't let you, he nodded at Marin, or you, at Lyra, because the galaxy needs living voices to argue about what comes next. It doesn't need another martyr story. It needs survivors with enough hope left to be angry. Marin's eyes brimmed. We need you. You needed me to build the engine, he said. You don't need me to watch it run. He looked between them. I'm asking for your help, he said. Not your permission, there isn't time for that. Lyra stared at him for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was low. If you do this, she said, I will hate you for leaving. I'd worry more if you didn't, he replied. But, she added, I'll make damn sure no one stops you before you start. Marin squeezed her eyes shut. I should try to talk you out of this, she muttered. I should call this cowardice dressed up as sacrifice. I should tell your hope is worth more alive than spread like butter over a dead machine. You can, he said. I believe it, she said. Every word, he nodded. And you're still going to do it, she whispered. Because that's who you are. He didn't deny it. She scrubbed at her face with the heel of her hand. Then we do this right, clean, minimal collateral, you deserve at least that much. Thank you, he said. She jabbed a finger at him. Don't thank me, I'm building your execution device. Better you than anyone else, he said softly. Outside, something exploded with enough force to make the walls shiver. Lyra rose. I'll buy you the time you need, she said. No more, no less. Try for more, he said. She barked a humorless laugh. Always demanding. They went their separate ways. The last phase of preparation felt strangely like a ritual. Marin and Elias descended into the deepest heart of the engine, a chamber most had never seen. This was the true core, the place where astrofields and neural patterns would fuse, where an anchor would plug themselves into circuits designed to rewrite reality's probabilities. The space was circular, its walls lined with crystalline panels that shimmered faintly even at rest. The central platform rose from the floor like an altar, edged with interfaces, neural mesh, and tightly coiled conduits. Overhead, the bulk of the engine loomed, humming subsonically, like a great animal breathing in its sleep. Marin moved through the room with swift, precise gestures, adjusting settings, rerouting lines, shutting down auxiliary anchor ports. With each port she powered down, the machine's design became more focused, more singular. She erased the old lattice of many. She made room for one. At this configuration, she said, voice clipped to keep it from breaking, the engine will treat you as both source and stabilizer. It will drink from you and use your pattern to rebuild the field it's already started to warp. You understand that means there's no going back out. I know, he said. She tossed him a harness, a woven mesh of sensor fibers and hard connectors. Put that on, no point getting sentimental about it. If I stand here and cry, we waste time. He smirked faintly. Don't stand there and cry then. She turned away so he wouldn't see the wetness in her eyes. He stripped out of his jacket and pulled on the harness. The mesh settled over his chest and shoulders like a net of cold fingers. The connectors clicked home against the interface ports along his spine and at the base of his skull. Comfortable? She asked. It itches, he said. Good, she said. Means you're still here. Overhead, the engine groaned as external impacts shook the structure. Lyra's voice crackled over the internal comm. They've breached the second perimeter. We're holding, but not for long. What's your status down there? Marin keyed her mic. 5 minutes. You have 3, Lyra replied and cut the channel. Marin muttered something exceptionally profane in 2 languages. Elias stepped onto the central platform. At its center, the main contact node awaited, a column of pale crystal rising to about shoulder height, its surface smooth and faintly warm. He'd touched it 100 times before in tests, in calibrations, in careful experiments. This would be the last time. Sit, Marin said. He did. She moved behind him, connecting leads, tightening bands, checking contact points. Her fingers lingered on his shoulder for a moment longer than necessary. When this starts, she said, you'll feel everything. Helpful, he said, she huffed. I mean you'll feel the field, the hope of everyone in range, their fear, their need. It'll hit you like a flood, don't try to hold it all, you'll drown. What should I do instead? He asked. She hesitated. Pick something to hold on to. One memory that feels like you, focus on that, the engine will do the rest. He thought of his father, of seed corn and stubborn seasons. He thought of Hallian's dying lights and a girl's small hand gripping a stranger's coat. He chose the moment he first stepped through a gate as a young man, heart pounding, mind racing, staring out at a sky full of unfamiliar stars and knowing, deep in his bones, that humanity could belong anywhere it was brave enough to reach. That'll do, he murmured. What? Marin asked. Nothing, he said. Just thanks for building this with me. We built a disaster, she said. We built a chance, he replied. Disaster was the default. Footsteps approached from behind. Lyra stepped into the chamber with 2 soldiers at her back, armor scorched, helmet under one arm. She took in the scene, Elias wired to the core, Marin checking final settings, and shook her head. You look ridiculous, she told him, like a scarecrow trapped in a chandelier. I was going for tragic hero, he said. You missed, she replied, but there was warmth in it. He met her gaze. How bad is it up there? Her face tightened. They've breached the outer ring. We've lost half the forward bunkers. I've got people fighting in hallways built to hold plumbing, not firefights. Ridhull's fleet is doing surgical strikes, trying not to kill more than he has to. The others are less picky. I'm sorry, Elias said. Don't be, she replied. This is what I'm for. She stepped closer, every movement deliberate, as if she were memorizing the shape of him. When this starts, she said, you'll be alone in here. Not for long, he said. If the models are right, I'll be very crowded very quickly. She tried to smile and failed. I don't know what's on the other side of this, she said. If there is another side, but if there is, you better make it weird. I'll do my best, he said. She reached out and gripped his forearm. You did this to us, she said. You built the thing that broke the world. Don't let anyone forget that. Don't let them turn you into some spotless saint, make them remember the mess. I thought you were trying to be comforting, he said. I am, she said. Because if they remember you were human, they'll remember they still are too. He swallowed hard. Thank you, he said. Marin cleared her throat. We're out of time. Lyra nodded briskly, stepping back. I'll hold the line, she said. You light the roads, try not to fry my memories, I like having them. I'll see what I can do, he said. She left without looking back because she was the kind of person who understood that sometimes turning around hurt too much. Marin took her place at the control pedestal. Last check, she said. Elias Verdane, by activating this sequence, you acknowledge that there is no second chance, no failsafe, no undo. Once you go in, you don't come back the way you left. I acknowledge, he said, and you're still going to do it. He looked up through the engine's skeletal canopy at the layers of crystal and conduit, at the faint glow of Astra stored in its wells, at the invisible weight of a galaxy leaning toward collapse. I am, he said. Marin nodded once sharply. Then let's give them a future worth cursing you from, she said. She pressed her hand to the panel. The engine woke. It started as a vibration in his bones. A low, throbbing hum that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, as if the universe itself had started to drum its fingers against the walls of his mind. The crystalline panels brightened, their inner structures shimmering with complex interference patterns. Neural conduits lit in branching paths, lines of light racing outward into the greater structure. Elias felt the field unfold. At first, it was like standing in a quiet room and realizing there's a crowd just outside the door, murmurs, footsteps, breathing, all muffled. Then the door opened. Emotion poured in. Not thoughts, not words, just feeling. Fear, sharp and bright. Love, heavy and fierce. Despair like a lead weight. Anger like hot needles. Grief, wide and slow. Hope, thin in some places, thick in others, frayed and tangled and still somehow glowing. He gasped. His body remained seated on the platform, hand on the core, harness wires humming, but his consciousness expanded, stretched, pulled taut like a net being cast over a wide sea. Marin's voice came from very far away. Connection stable. Anchor engaged. Field curvature adapting? He couldn't answer. The engine wrapped around his pattern, tracing the contours of his memories, his deepest convictions, his ugliest fears. It flicked through his life like a reader leafing through a book at impossible speed, marking every line where the word "yet" appeared in the margins. We might fail, we are failing. And yet it drank those parts. Not all at once, no sharp tearing, no singular moment of loss. Rather, a continuous siphoning, like water soaking into dry ground, like warmth leaving a body in winter. He felt gates across the galaxy flare as the engine's power reached them. The Marimo replacement gate flickered back to life. The Lorian rim root stabilized. Weak wells brightened. Entropy curves bent, slowed, reversed in places. The roads between stars held where they should have fallen. On world after world, people looked up as power grids steadied and long-dead relays sputtered awake. Ships stranded near dead frames suddenly found coordinates resolving again. The Hope engine was working, and it was eating him. He felt Lyra's battle distantly, like a memory of noise. He felt her rage, her stubborn refusal to give an inch. He felt a Marine on the lower deck throw himself across a grenade. He felt a medic staunching 3 wounds with 2 hands. He felt a terrified tech override his own fear long enough to lock a bulkhead that would keep a squad alive. He felt Ridhull, aboard a coalition cruiser, flinch as the engine's field brushed against his mind. It did not drink from him. The configurations spared other species, but he sensed the ambassador's horror, his awe, his reluctant respect. He felt the little girl outside, clutching her father's hand as the air around her shifted again. "Papa," she whispered, "something changed." "What do you feel?" her father asked. She closed her eyes. "It doesn't feel like we're losing everything anymore," she said slowly. "It feels like someone is holding a door open in a storm." Her father held her closer, tears running into her hair. "Then," he said, "we owe them everything." Elias felt that too. It hurt. It helped. Deep in the core, Marin watched the readings with a scientist's horror and pride. "Field stability holding," she murmured. "Gate network synchronization at 70%, 80-90. Anchor integrity at," she swallowed, declining but within expected curve. "At this draw rate, the broader Hope field dips but doesn't crash. They'll feel it, but they'll recover." Outside, the battle raged. Inside, one man's mind stretched across the lattice of a dying age and held it together with the last of his unreasonable convictions. He felt pieces of himself slew off, small things, at first. The memory of a particular meal with someone he'd cared about. The precise smell of rain on the tin roof of his childhood home. The exact shape of his mother's hands. They fell away without drama, dissolving into the engine's flow. He clung to the core memory he'd chosen. Stepping through that first gate, heart hammering, eyes drinking in the sight of an alien sky and thinking, with absolute certainty, "We belong here, we belong wherever we choose to stand." The engine wrapped that memory around its own structure. Hope burned brighter. For a while, it was almost bearable. Then the field deepened. To hold the gates, to push back the accelerating entropy, the engine had to pull harder. Eddies of despair in the wider field tried to drag the curves down, the machine compensated by drawing more from its anchor. He felt whole years of his life dim, faces blurred, names slipped. The meaning of old arguments melted into nothing, leaving only faint impressions of anger and reconciliation. "This is unsustainable," a part of him thought distantly. Another part answered, "It only needs to last long enough." How long is long enough? The children will tell you if they get there. Somewhere above, Lyra ordered a final fallback to the inner ring. Her armor was cracked. She'd taken a blade to the ribs and a blast to the leg. She moved like a woman held together by spite. Her squad was half its original size. They held a choke point at corridor H13, weapons braced on overturned consoles, wires sparking overhead. Juthar bodies lay piled in the junction, black blood congealing with dust. An Anasari infiltrator oozed against a sealed door, its surface crystallized by emergency coolants. A young soldier beside her, barely 20, eyes blown wide, asked, "How long do we hold, Admiral?" "As long as it takes," she said. "Takes for what?" She glanced at the ceiling, as if she could see through metal and crystal and field to where Elias sat in his harness, dissolving into light. "For him to finish," she said. Behind the alien lines, Ridhull argued with his own high command. "Stop firing on the core," he pleaded. "You'll destabilize the engine and collapse the field. It's holding the gates." "That abomination is violating the fundamental integrity of sentient life," the Juthar general snarled. "Better a galaxy of closed roads than one ruled by that." "It is not ruling," Ridhull insisted. "It's sacrificing. Can't you feel it?" The field shifted. "The drain is centralized now. They've chosen one, not many. That changes the calculus." The crystalline envoy chimed harshly. Under many, the principle is unchanged. No, Ridhul said, crest flaring. Principles are not made in a vacuum. Context matters, cost matters, intention matters. They've found a way to pay the bill themselves. I will not sanction murder on top of that. Silence stretched. We reduce fire on the core, the Anasari liaison said at last. But we will not withdraw, we will watch. If the field starts to drain again from the many, we strike. It was the closest thing to mercy Elias would get. He didn't hear the argument, but he felt the weapons shift away from the engine's heart to its outer shell. He felt Lyra exhale in relief she would never admit to. He felt Marin sag just a little at her console. He held. Time blurred. Marin watched as the indicator labeled anchor coherence ticked downward, fraction by fraction. With each tiny drop, more of Elias' subjective self was stripped away and repurposed as structural scaffolding for the hope field. She whispered updates into a mic he might or might not hear. Primary wells stabilized. The Haldron link reports traffic resuming. We just got a ping from a colony that thought the galaxy had forgotten it. Kestrin Station lit up their festival lamps again. Another drop. A child on Halion 3 just watched a ship land for the first time in months. She wrote "Thank you" in the dust with a stick. I thought you'd like to know that. Another. Some of the anchors from Extraction Day, they're smiling again. Not many, not fully, but the curve is bending in the right direction. Your sacrifice is healing them. Another. Lyra is still alive somehow. She says if you turn into a smug myth, she'll find a way to haunt you. She wiped her eyes and kept talking. Outside, the coalition fleet steadied in uneasy orbit, their leaders watching the field's behavior with a mix of suspicion and grudging awe. The gates held. The collapse slowed. In the core, Elias grew thin. He noticed when he lost his father's face, it slipped away like a reflection disturbed by ripples on a pond. He noticed when the memory of his own first gatewalk began to fade at the edges. He pulled it back, cradled it like an ember cupped in shaking hands. I need this one, he told the engine. Leave me this. The machine did not understand words, but it understood patterns. It left that one image mostly intact. Around it, everything else eroded. He felt himself leaning more and more on things that weren't his own. Borrowed hopes from strangers, fragments of stories from worlds he'd never seen, flashes of courage and terror and stubbornness rushing through him and out into the lattice. His own self became less important than the fact that something still held the line. He clung to two thoughts. Humans always find something. Let this be the something. At last, Marin saw the curve level off. Anchor coherence at 5%, she whispered. Field stabilization no longer accelerating. We've reached a steady state. We can maintain this with reduced draw, she swallowed. We can let him rest a little. She initiated the taper sequence, slowly reducing the engine's intake while keeping its output to the gate network within a stable band. It was delicate work. A misstep could cause the whole structure to shiver and collapse, but the engine obeyed. The crushing intensity of the field eased. In the core, Elias felt the pressure lessen. It did not bring back what was lost, but it allowed him one clear breath. For the first time in what felt like ages, he focused inward. He found the memory of the first gate still there, burning softly. He wrapped what remained of himself around it. He listened. He heard voices. Not distinct words, not separate minds, but a chorus of emotional signatures echoing faintly through the lattice. Gratitude, relief, sorrow, resolve. He realized, with a flicker of wry surprise, that he was not alone after all. Pieces of others had joined him here, tiny contributions from volunteers, echoes from those who had believed so fiercely that their hope had imprinted itself on the field. He was not the only support beam, just the largest. Good, he thought, I never liked working alone. His sense of self was ragged, frayed, stitched together with more willpower than substance. But he was there, still holding, still human in some small, stubborn way. For now. Above, the coalition fleets finally powered down their main batteries. Ridhul stood at his observation port, watching the patterns in the Astra fields ripple across the tactical hollow. The drain has centralized, a sensor officer said. The wider field dips but recovers. They're not pulling from the many anymore. Ridhul's crest lifted just a little. Then we watch, he said. We wait. We learn whether humanity has found a way to dance on the knife edge without falling. And if they haven't. The Juthar general asked through a side channel. Then, Ridhul said softly, we will have to decide whether to cut the blade or the dancers. For the first time since the siege began, he allowed himself to hope. Just a little. In the corridors, fighting dwindled. Without fresh orders to press into the core, some coalition ground troops pulled back to defensible points, uncertain whether they were still attacking a weapon or standing in the presence of something closer to a shared miracle. Lyra dragged herself into the engine viewing gallery, leaning on a makeshift crutch. She stared up through the transparent shields at the crystalline towers, now glowing with steady, not frantic light. "He did it," someone whispered behind her. She didn't turn. Her eyes were on the central column where Elias sat, almost lost beneath cables and light. "We did it," she corrected. "He just did the part the rest of us were too sane for." Marin's voice murmured over the internal speakers, half to him, half to herself. "Field stable, gates open, anchor anchored." Lyra pressed her forehead against the glass, eyes closed. "Don't you dare let go yet," she said. "Not until I've had a chance to yell at you properly." In the quiet at the center of it all, Elias floated. He had chosen. The siege had reached its climax. The roads between stars held, for now. The price had been set. The Hope engine hummed around him, a vast chorus singing, a song built from his last, stubborn memory of stepping through a gate into a new sky and thinking, "We belong here." He didn't know how long he could keep that note. He only knew this: as long as humanity refused to go quietly, his sacrifice would not be in vain. He felt another gate light up across the galaxy. He felt a child somewhere laugh in sudden relief when a ship arrived that no one thought would make it. He felt in the bones of the machine and the fading edges of his self the simple, battered truth that had brought him here: hope was finite. But what you did with it before it ran out, that was the story. And he had chosen how his would end. The siege of the Hope engine was not over. Battles still raged. Debates had only just begun. Allies turned away or crept tentatively back. But the external war, the clash of fleets, the storm of fire around Vaskra 9, had reached its crescendo here, in a chamber filled with light and one man's fading dreams. The next war would be quieter. Fought in council halls, in temples, in songs and whispered arguments about whether the price had been too high. For now, though, there was a fragile, tenuous, hard-won pause. The galaxy breathed. The lights between stars stayed on. And at the core of it all, Elias Verdane, embodiment of humanity's maddening, beautiful refusal to accept extinction, sat in a chair, hand on a crystal heart, and let the last of his hope burn for everyone else. By the time they realized what he meant to do, he was already half gone. The Hope engine hummed in its steady, star-deep rhythm. Not the frantic roar of extraction day, not the chaotic pulsing of first activation, but a low, resonant sound that seemed to come from the bones of the world. Above, the battered hull of the Vaskra 9 facility creaked under the shifting weight of alien ships in orbit and the residual stress of bombardment. Fires smoldered in broken corridors. Medics worked by lantern light in triage bays where power came and went like an indecisive tide. In the core chamber, the lights never wavered. Here, the engine held. Here, Elias Verdane sat strapped into the harness on the central platform, hand resting on the crystal heart of the machine, eyes half closed, breathing shallow but steady. Marin Cade stood at the control pedestal, watching numbers crawl and curves bend on the holoscreens. Lyra Chen leaned against a railing above, one arm in a sling, the other resting on the hilt of a battered sidearm, as if the universe might still decide to send someone for her to hit. They could both feel it. The way the room seemed to tilt toward Elias now, the way the engine's energy flowed around and through him instead of merely past. "He can't hold this forever," Lyra murmured. "He doesn't have to," Marin said. "Just long enough." Long enough for what? Marin didn't answer. What was there to say? Long enough for the galaxy to get out from under its own collapsing roof. Inside the lattice of light and thought that the engine had wrapped around him, Elias drifted. The world of metal and stone below his chair had become a suggestion, a rumor. He could feel his body, an ache in his back, the pinch of the harness, the slow, patient beat of his heart, but those sensations were distant, like memories of a place he'd visited long ago. The dominant reality now was the field. It stretched around him in all directions, a shimmering web of connections, each strand a line of force drawn between minds. Not individuals, not exactly. The engine did not show him faces, names, or clear images of strangers. It showed him patterns. Here, a dense knot of determination, a mining colony refusing to abandon a failing habitat. There, a bright flare of joy, a child watching a ship land after months of silence. Farther out, a hollow ring where a gate had recently died. Within it, a dimming swirl of collective fear as an isolated world realized the roads had closed. He felt them all at once. A billion tiny pushings against, a billion small refusals to bow to the dark. This was humanity's hope field, laid bare. Messy, contradictory, streaked with terror and selfishness and apathy, but threaded through with something stubborn and bright that refused, point blank, to accept the last quiet. The engine took his own pattern, his own history of refusals, his own foolish insistence that there had to be a way, and stretched it over this whole wild tapestry like a net. Anchor, it called him, in the only language it understood: math, resonance, map, geometry. Hold. He had never been less ready and never more willing. The first memories to go were the ones he had never really trusted. His academic triumphs, polished for funding committees and conference introductions, blurred at the edges. The dust-smelling halls where he'd paced as a young man arguing with professors about the nature of Astra, the long nights in cold labs, the thrill of getting numbers to line up with what the universe actually did, those faded into a general sense of having once been sure of something and having been right, but the details washed away. The engine found those memories full of effort but little raw hope. It took what little they contained and flowed on. I can lose those, he thought, and felt a brief, wry stab of humor. Nobody ever loved me for my citation counts. Other memories clung harder. The day his father held up a kernel of seed corn between finger and thumb and told a scrawny boy, "You don't eat this unless there's no spring coming. You understand? This is faith you can hold." The first time he saw a gate up close, the way its inner surface shimmered like captured lightning, the low hum it added to the air. The line of people waiting to walk through, nervous, excited, tired, hopeful. The first time he stepped through himself, lungs tight, eyes wide, feeling nothing and everything as reality blinked and reassembled around him in a new sky. We belong here, the younger Elias had thought, staring up at unfamiliar constellations. We belong anywhere we're brave enough to stand. The engine paused over that memory like a tongue on a sweet tooth. He felt it pull and clung. "Not yet," he whispered, though his mouth didn't move. "I need that one still." The machine did not understand, it had no concept of needing, but it was governed by rules, and one of those rules was this: patterns with high structural value were preserved as long as possible. That moment, boy stepping through the gate, recognizing his own species in the courage of its gamble, had become the core template the field was using. So the engine took from elsewhere. It drew hope from his first clumsy love, from the quiet joy of reading late into the night as a child, from the private pride he had felt watching humanity's first subgalactic network maps sprawl across a screen. Those memories dimmed, then frayed, then dissolved into raw structure. He felt lighter in a way that had nothing to do with peace. Outside, the siege lingered but no longer raged. The coalition fleets held position, weapons warm but silent, their commanders watching the stabilizing Astra flows with reluctant fascination. The Juthar swarm still had hardliners ready to fire. The Relian crystals pulsed with a cold insistence on ethical equilibrium. The Anasari ships flexed their biometallic hulls in slow, thoughtful ripples. At the center of their formation, Ambassador Ridhull stood in a dim observation bay, crest low, watching the numbers. "The field drain has settled into a single-source pattern," a sensor tech reported. "The wider human hope field is dipping but not collapsing. The gates are holding." "How long?" Ridhull asked. The tech glanced at him. "How long will the anchor last?" Ridhull nodded. The tech swallowed. "We can't model that with precision, but whatever they're doing, it's working. Systems that were within hours of failure are back in the blue zones." "Back in the blue," Ridhull repeated softly. "At the cost of." He looked toward Vaskra 9, though from here he could see only the faint blush of engine light through the thin atmosphere. He did not know inside that facility there was a single chair, a single man, holding on as pieces of himself fell away. He did not need to know the details. He felt it. All across the coalition, empaths and telepaths, sensitives and trained psychics reported the same: a sharp, singular presence in the center of the human field, burning down like a candle in a wind, giving off steady light as it melted. "He is choosing it," one Anasari sent in a trembling thought wave. "We are sure. This is not theft. This is gift." There was a long silence in the command channels. Then the crystalline envoy, whose people had argued hardest against the engine, chimed in a low, somber chord. "We will not fire on a gift," they said. The Juthar general hissed but did not countermand. The fleet stood down from full assault. They remained. They watched. Some prayed in their own ways, songs, harmonics, meditations, for the human anchor to hold just long enough. In the engine chamber, the air had taken on a taste like snow before dawn. Marin watched the anchor coherence indicator tick downward, her knuckles white on the edge of the console. 40%, she whispered. 35. Lyra had argued to stay. "You don't need to see this," Marin had said. "I really do," Lyra had replied. If he's going to be an idiot for all of us, the least I can do is bear witness. Reluctantly, Marin had let her take a position on the balcony overlooking the core. Now Lyra stood very still, watching the faint, occasional twitch of Elias' fingers, the slow rise and fall of his chest. The harness cables thrummed. The crystal he leaned against glowed, light pulsing in time with something far larger than a human heart. "You know," Lyra said hoarsely, "I always thought he'd die in a lab accident. Too much coffee, not enough sleep, something falling on his head." Marin huffed, a wet little exhale that might have been a laugh if it hadn't been shaped like a sob. "He nearly did." "Twice. He always looks so surprised when people listen to him," Lyra said, "like he thought we'd come to our senses at any moment. He was never surprised we needed hope," Marin murmured, "just surprised anyone believed he'd find it." 25%, the anchor coherence display whispered. Marin forced herself to keep talking because if she stopped, the silence might crush her. "Think about it," she said quietly. "If this works, there will be children who grow up never knowing the gates almost failed. People will use them to commute to work, to visit friends, to go on stupid vacations. They'll complain about delays, they'll take it all for granted again." Lyra watched the man in the harness. "Good," she said. "That's the point." Marin wiped her eyes with the heel of her hand. "You're supposed to be the grim one," she told Lyra. "I am grim," Lyra replied. "I'm grim enough to want a future where teenagers roll their eyes at history lessons about the siege of the Hope engine and say, 'That sounds boring.'" 20%, whispered the display. Inside the field, Elias drifted through the last rooms of his life. He remembered the first time he'd failed at something that mattered. A gate stability model he'd sworn would work that collapsed under its own complexity, leaving him sitting at his console at 3 in the morning, staring at the jagged graph of his own mistake. He remembered the first time he'd stood in a dying colony's hub and told them, plain and honest, how bad the Astra decline was. He remembered the silence afterward, heavy and thick, and the way one man had raised his hand and asked, "So what can we do?" as if accepting the answer was a foregone conclusion. He remembered the little girl on Halion 3 reading the words "keep the light burning" on a cracked display screen and asking her father if they had enough light left to keep. He remembered Marin's face the night they first drew Astra from a test lattice and realized hope did, in some strange, dangerous way, bend the universe. He remembered Lyra's hand on his shoulder as she said, "If there's a way through this, we'll punch it open." He remembered Ridhul saying, "Humans are dangerous because you hope too brightly." He remembered his father's rough palm and the seed corn and the warning, "You don't eat this unless there's no spring coming," but also the unspoken promise in the way the older man had looked at the field, at the sky, at his son. "There will be springs you don't deserve," that look had said. "You plant for those, too." Each memory flared as the engine touched it. Each flared, then thinned, then joined the stream. It hurt, not like broken bones or shredded flesh, but like giving away pieces of a story you were in the middle of telling. He suspected if he had been less tired, he might have fought harder. As it was, he let them go, one by one, with a kind of weary gratitude. "Thank you," he thought, as each bright scrap slid away. "You got me this far." The memory he clung to, the one he refused to cede, was simple. Stepping through that first gate, lungs tight, stepping out into a world he had never seen, feeling small and human and impossibly vast at the same time. The engine circled that memory like planets around a star. It used it as a mold. It poured the hope field through it, over and over, reshaping, reinforcing, aligning. Every human on every world who refused, in that moment, to sink into despair was unconsciously echoing that thought. We belong here. Here in this galaxy. Here in these bodies. Here in this struggle. The Astra output surged. Gates all across the network flared bright, their frames ringing with song. Wells that had been dull for decades brightened with new fuel. Ship captains stared at their instruments and swore, then laughed, then headed for destinations they had reluctantly scratched off their charts long ago. On one forgotten colony at the edge of nowhere, an old gate that had flickered for the last time weeks earlier stuttered, coughed, and then relit fully. The people gathered there, blinked in disbelief as the aperture steadied into a clean, blue-lit circle. A child standing near the dock whispered, "The road came back." Her mother, who had spent every night since the collapse staring at that ring, trying not to cry, laughed once, the sound cracked and bright. "Yes," she said. Somebody held it open. Somebody, singular. She didn't know his name. She didn't need to. In the core chamber, the anchor coherence indicator dipped below 10%. Marin wanted to stop. Every instinct screamed at her to shut the engine down, to pull the harness off, to let Elias' mind remain as intact as possible, to bargain with entropy for a compromised peace. But the models she herself had built sat in front of her, arcs and falls and thresholds and tipping points. If they cut the flow now, the stabilization would be temporary. The networks would wobble, stagger onward for a decade, maybe two, and then the long, patient decline would resume. They needed a new equilibrium. They needed to bend the curve and let it settle somewhere that wasn't oblivion. 5%, the display whispered. Lyra gripped the railing so hard her knuckles were bloodless. You don't have to see the last part, Marin said, voice raw. Lyra's jaw worked. Yes, she said. I do. In orbit, Ridhull watched the field graphs on his own displays. The curve is flattening, the sensor tech said. They're reaching balance. Ridhull exhaled slowly, as if he'd been holding his breath for days. What happens to him? He asked quietly. We don't know, the tech admitted. We don't know what's left inside that roll. Ridhull bowed his head. Then remember him as if he were watching, he said. At the center of the engine, Elias felt himself thinning. There was no clear boundary between him and the field anymore. His thoughts were less his thoughts and more ripples across a shared pond. When he tried to remember his own face, he found a blur that could have been any of 1,000 human men. He didn't mind as much as he thought he would. He had stopped feeling like an individual hero some time ago. He felt more like a bridge. He felt children dreaming of growing up to fly ships. He felt old people deciding to try planting one more crop. He felt scientists scribbling new equations on old paper. He felt petty cruelties and foolish arguments and stupid jokes and impulsive kindnesses. He felt the whole contradictory mess of his species and loved it with a tenderness that surprised him. The engine reached deeper, looking for anything left to eat. There was one last thing. One last, small, stubborn spark that did not map cleanly onto any pattern. His own personal wish, as unadorned as a hand on a door. Let them live. It was not eloquent. It was not original. It just was. He realized, dimly amused, that for all the years he had spent polishing speeches and crafting arguments, this little knot of desire was what he truly had to give. He felt the engine close around it like cupped hands. He felt it ask, in the only way a machine could ask this too, he considered. He thought of Lyra, battered and unbroken, walking away from a dozen last stands to yell at politicians. He thought of Marin, exhausted and furious, fighting anyone who tried to smooth the edges of what they'd done. He thought of Ridhull, mourning a friend and a principal at once. He thought of the little girl who had said the sky felt like it was losing something warm. He thought of that first step onto alien soil. Let them live, the thought repeated. He let the engine have it. There was a moment, not long, not short, where everything was very, very bright. The Astra output peaked, spilling into gates and wells and reserve tanks in a galaxy-wide flood. For a brief span measured in seconds but felt like a held breath through 500,000 worlds, the network sang as if it were new forged. Then the peak passed. The flow settled. The field stabilized. Anchor coherence ticked down to 1%, then to 0. On the console, the indicator went from a soft, urgent blue to a steady, neutral green. Marin stared at it. That's it, she whispered. On the platform, Elias Verdane's chest rose and fell once more. Then again, his eyes were closed. The harness hummed with residual charge. He did not move. Marin's fingers hovered over the disengage sequence. Lyra's voice was a rasp from the balcony. Is he? Marin swallowed. Neural activity is strange, she said. There's patterns, but not a normal human signature. Is he still there? Lyra pressed. Marin stared at the waveforms. They looked to her exactly like what they were. A human mind stretched beyond all reasonable topology, bits of it smeared across a lattice of Astra and stranger stuff. I don't know, she said. Not in any way we'd recognize. Lyra's jaw clenched. Then we treat him like he's listening, she said. Just in case. Marin nodded. She stepped away from the console and approached the platform. Up close, Elias looked almost peaceful. The lines of strain were still in his face, carved by days of impossible labor, but the tension had gone out of his jaw. His hand lay against the crystal, fingers splayed, as if he'd fallen asleep reaching for something. Marin placed her palm gently near his on the same cool surface. Elias, she said, voice shaking, it worked. She laughed, a short, astonished sound. You were right, you idiot, it worked. The gates are holding. The wells are stable. The simulations, they're all so much better than they used to be. She bowed her head. I'm going to spend the rest of my life arguing that this was wrong, she said softly. That we should never have pushed you into this position, that the universe shouldn't demand this, that we can never, ever call this a good thing, only a necessary one. Her fingers curved against the crystal. "But I will also spend the rest of my life making sure they remember you as you were, not as some sanitized, heroic symbol. You were stubborn and lonely and took on too much and laughed at the wrong times and forgot to eat when you were excited." She swallowed. "I loved you for all that," she whispered. "So, if you're still in there, in any way that matters, know that." She stepped back, shoulders shaking. Lyra came down the stairs with a slow, uneven stride. She stopped at the edge of the platform, looking at her friend, the man who had dragged her into this, the man she had followed anyway. "You did it," she said. "You bastard. You actually did it." She looked up at the engine towering above. "Listen up, you stupid machine," she muttered. "You got one, that's it. One you ever so much as twitch at anyone else the way you did at him. I will dedicate whatever's left of my life to tearing you down to atoms and scattering them in intergalactic space. Do you understand me?" The engine, having no understanding of threats, hummed on. She laid 2 fingers against the crystal anyway, near his hand. "Rest," she said quietly. "We've got it from here." If there was any echo of his consciousness left in that bright, complex field, it did not answer. But somewhere far away, a child who had just walked through a gate for the first time felt a sudden, unaccountable sense of gratitude for someone she'd never met. It was enough. Years later, the Hope engine would be less a weapon of controversy and more a piece of cautious infrastructure. It would be watched by committees and guarded by treaties. There would be layers of interlocks and rules phrases that began with "never again." There would also be, on Vaskra 9's scarred basalt plain, a monument. The aliens had argued, at first, that building anything near the engine smacked of worship. Humans replied that they didn't worship, they remembered. In the end, it was Ridhul who designed it. He came back to the quiet world long after the siege ended, long after the immediate passions cooled, carrying with him years of listening to stories from both his own people and from humans who had survived those days. The monument rose near the engine complex, but not attached to it. A ring of stone cut from Vaskra 9's own bedrock, standing upright like a gate without an aperture. In the center of the circle hung a simple crystal sphere, no larger than a man's head, embedded with the faintest trace of Astra. It did nothing. It powered nothing. It just glowed softly. At its base, chiseled in simple, sharp letters in a dozen scripts, were the words, "From one spark, a million suns. Pilgrims came." Not worshippers, most of them didn't believe in saints, and those that did had their own, but people who wanted to stand in a place where something immense and terrible and beautiful had happened. Some brought flowers. Some brought broken pieces of old gate frames. Some brought their children, lifted them into their arms, and pointed at the ring. "This," they would say, "is where we almost lost everything, and where someone decided we wouldn't." The children would nod, half understanding, more interested in the way the light of the crystal played on their fingers. That was fine. History survived in fragments, passed along like stories around a fire. So did hope. Sometimes, late at night, engineers working in the facility's lower levels would notice something odd in the readouts. The Astra output from the engine was steady, predictable, within expected variances. But the portion of the flow that came from the original activation, the segment tagged in the logs as Verdane baseline, had a slightly different profile than all subsequent contributions. It ran a fraction of a degree warmer. Not physically. Not in any way the instruments could define. It felt warmer. Techs would swear the gate apertures it powered had a slightly softer light. That ships jumping along routes most heavily underpinned by that original surge experienced marginally fewer misjumps, that the people who traveled them reported absurd little coincidences. Meeting old friends unexpectedly, finding lost things, deciding not to give up, and then suddenly having reason not to. When such claims reached official channels, they were politely dismissed as pattern-seeking, survivor bias, human tendency to romanticize. Privately, some of the older scientists, Marin among them, would smile and not argue too hard. "Maybe it's just in our heads," she'd say, sitting on a panel somewhere years later, gray in her hair, lines around her eyes deepened by laughter she'd earned dearly. "Maybe it's nothing, but personally I like the idea that the first big burn carried something extra." "What?" a student would ask. She'd shrug. "A man," she'd say, "just a man who wouldn't let go when everything told him to. A man who poured every last scrap of his own hope into the lattice and said, 'Here, take this, make something of it.' It wouldn't surprise me if that left a mark." Officially, of course, there was no such thing as personality imprinting in Astra flows. Officially, the engine was just a machine, and its outputs were just energy. But somewhere in quiet corners of human space, people told a different story. They said that when you stood close to certain gates, old ones, the ones that had nearly died in the dark years, you could feel a faint warmth on your skin, like sunlight remembered on a winter morning. They said that stepping through those gates felt, for an instant, like being very small and very brave at the same time. They said that if you listened hard enough, you could almost hear someone thinking, "Let them live." And whether that was true in any measurable way or not, it made them walk through with their heads held a little higher. Because in the end, that was what one man's hope had bought them. Not certainty, not perfection, just another chance to try and fail and try again under skies still filled with reachable stars. One spark had burned itself out, but it had lit a path. And on a quiet rock at the edge of a quiet system, under a dim and patient sun, a ring of stone and a small, warm crystal waited as children traced the words at its base and asked their parents what it meant. From one spark, a million suns, they'd read aloud, stumbling a bit over the syllables. Their parents would smile and say, "It means we survived." And somewhere, woven into the soft hum of gates and wells and the stubborn, inexplicable persistence of living things in a difficult universe, the last echo of Elias Verdane's hope would shimmer. Not as a voice, not as a ghost, but as the simple fact that the roads between stars were still open. That was his monument. That, and every ship that stepped through, carrying people who would never know his name and did not have to, because that was the whole point. His last thought, scattered into the engine and then into the lattice of Astra itself, had been small and human and enough. Let them live. They did.